Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
Steve and I watched across from the round plastic table we were sitting at as the two men in front of us stepped out of their cells. There were 20 soldiers surrounding us, all dressed in heavy armor and carrying massive guns. All, sadly, were mostly useless if the people they were pointed at got serious, but thankfully they were also unnecessary. Creel and Bucky had been getting deprogrammed for days, speaking to therapists, scientists, and getting checked by neurosurgeons. Now they were looking at us, looking tired, but somehow happy. If two grumps like them could be happy, they were wearing patients' uniforms, all blue outfits, and Bucky's mechanical arm had been removed for security reasons. They moved forward and took seats, both eyeing us. "Hey, Steve," Bucky said, smiling. "I heard about everything that happened. Bridge, huh? It's a good name. Isn't that stuff top secret?" I asked. Creel chuckled, and Bucky's smile became a little sour. "We've been playing a game, trying to see who could overhear the most from the guards. He wins every time," Creel admitted. "I was always an enforcer, not so much the assassin." Bucky seemed to falter slightly at that. Steve noticed that, and chose then to take out the physical files he had printed, taking out 2 pieces of paper and passing them to Creel and Bucky. "You'll be happy to know that we managed to speak to the President and those of the United Nations. Thanks to the information you both provided, many Hydra personnel and cells have been apprehended." "The information," Creel started to say before I coughed meaningfully. To be truthful, all our focus had been on curing them. Any information provided had been with X and Jarvis's help, but people were not going to let even brainwashing be an excuse, not if they could pin things on the two of them. Politicians would find it more palatable if they were trading information for leniency. "I have been approved," Steve continued, "to offer you both options. Now it means a couple more days of being tested along with other standard background checks, just to make sure you can both are safe, but you have options. 50 years in prison," Bucky said distastefully while reading the paper provided to him. "Not a great start." "I only have 25, Creel said, though he still didn't sound pleased. "Yeah, well, Bucky has a longer list working against him," I admitted. "And you both would get time off for good behavior." "Well, the possibility," Creel grunted and picked up that offer, tearing it in half. When the men around us pointed guns at him for the aggressive act, the 4 of us ignored them. "What else you got?" Steve held out the next papers, and the pair took them. "Working for the US military?" Bucky asked, sounding a bit interested. "What would that mean? Enlisting again?" "Not exactly," Steve said softly. I kept quiet as Bucky and Creel continued to read. The papers were an offer, sure, but people in the US military wanted Bucky and Creel to act as their personal military death squad, to go into the Middle East and other places and kill targets based on political leanings rather than actual need, to strike like a thunderbolt on America's enemies, most of them imagined. Granted, that wasn't what it actually said. The truth was hidden in the margins. Literally, we'd added little stuff in the margins. Mostly because Jarvis and X had included transcripts of the secret meetings of the men who had come up with the idea and what they wanted exactly. We'd be keeping an eye on them, but for now Bucky and Creel knew the truth. "So more of the same," Creel said, disgusted. "We'd be killing innocent people." "We're going to look into those guys," I mentioned. "But the US military is an option. There are good men that could use you, places where you can do critical business, but there is a third option. One that allows you to do the same work. You'd still work with the US military at times, still take out terrorists, but your bosses would be very different." Bucky and Creel watched as Steve pushed forward another pair of papers, and Bucky laughed. "Yeah, stop being dramatic, Steve. We're in." Steve grinned. "You heard already?" "Gonna need to train your men to be quieter," Bucky confirmed. "So what, we getting the offer to be Avengers?" "Reserve," Steve said. "You'll be under Sam Wilson." "The guy with wings?" Creel asked. "Seriously?" "The career soldier with a good military record, a fresh face that has no ties with Tony Stark to cause any suspicions that Rhodey does, nor weird powers like mine to scare conservatives," I said simply. Sam will look damn good to the public. Sadly, image is apparently everything now, so that's important. I scowled a bit at that. I mean, Sam was a damn good choice, but the guys who were now in charge of making sure that we all looked good were annoying. Anyways, we're looking for more members. There's someone who's a little less palatable than you guys are. More than us? Creel asked, surprised. She had a choice, Steve replied, but she's not going to be treated with kid gloves either way. We'll be working with a team of bridge agents as well, I said, along with the Avengers, focused on stopping Hydra across America in particular, though it may vary. It's not all you'll be doing, of course, but it's part of the whole shebang. Avenger, Creel tasted the word on his tongue and seemed to find it odd, but worth it. Yeah, I'm in. Same for me, Bucky looked down at where his robotic arm had once been. But I might need a replacement. Don't worry, I said. I've gained some experience with that. Keep in mind, there are some regulations in place, and daily checkups as well as tests, and we need to wait for Tony to capture Vasily Karpov. Bucky flinched at that name. But we'll be able to fight, Creel asked, voice becoming harder. Starting with Hydra? Starting with one name in particular, I nodded towards Steve, who slid another piece of paper to Creel look at. He smiled. Yeah, I want him. First, let me check one last time, I asked Creel. He nodded. Take a deep breath. Calm your mind, Creel eyed me, listening with a look of concentration. You know what is best. What is best is you comply. Compliance will be rewarded. Now, get out of your chair and, absorb the paper in your hand, I guess. Creel didn't hesitate to chuckle. Fuck that. Let's go beat his head in. Daniel Whitehall Werner Reinhardt. January 17. Werner Reinhardt had been alive for over 100 years. Despite his age, he had regained his youth some time ago. His skin as smooth as when he was a younger man, his pale white hair as thick. He'd seen and done many things in that lifetime. A fact he was quite proud of. But Hydra falling, especially the way it had fallen, managed to surprise him, a fact he would have found interesting if hadn't disturbed him so much. The only reason the man who had taken the name Whitehall had managed to survive was the painstaking work he had done to make sure that his own part of the organization had been left separate from those who were connected to S.H.I.E.L.D. It had been close, as far as he could tell, but he had been careful. Now he could work from the shadows. So he had no idea what to think when, while perusing files on the hidden locations of several S.H.I.E.L.D. agents' safe houses, his computer suddenly began to display the image of the symbol of Hydra. It was a simple picture, similar to the dozens painted on the walls in the skyscraper whose office he sat in. But as he watched, a green flash of light was followed by the logo shape-shifting. Tentacles became wings. The head of the octopus became the head of a bird. Soon S.H.I.E.L.D.'s symbol appeared, modified, with some strange white lines separating the wings to give it a new look, but one that sent a chill down Reinhardt's spine. At that moment, an alarm began to sound. The door opened, and soldiers rushed into the room. "Sir," one man said. Reinhardt relaxed when he realized this was one of his men. "S.H.I.E.L.D. found us. We need to run." "I thought we were hidden," the Hydra leader spat out, rushing to rise up. "General Hale turned on us," the soldier said, sounding horrified. "That's what our people are saying anyway. When she heard about your plans," Reinhardt cursed, following his soldiers. With the chaos that had followed in the aftermath of Pierce's failure, Reinhardt, like his fellow Hydra leaders, had reached for any resources they could. So, he had attempted to make Ruby Hale one of those resources, to bring her in. He told her mother to bring her in for experimentation. There was some risky things that could be done to give or improve a person with power, make them a true threat to even Avenger-level individuals. Ruby could be severely injured by the experiments, but it would be worth it. Even her death could aid in the cause. Reinhardt shook his head as he and his soldiers rushed through the halls of his home. Apparently, he had overestimated General Hale's ability to put aside her feelings for the greater good. A sad truth of women that becoming mothers ruined their ability to think logically. Reinhardt sighed. Thankfully, he had contingencies in place for such a situation. Hydra would rise once more, even as a smug smile rose on his face. The soldiers in front of the small group came to a stop. When Reinhardt looked up and scowled at the sight before him, two men strode towards the group, standing out in the white halls. Both wore blue uniforms. One had a star on his chest and blue helmet as he carried a very familiar shield. The other had a robotic arm colored black with green lines designed like circuitry across the surface, carrying a gun in his hands. Captain America was horrific enough, but Reinhardt felt even his brilliant mind freeze at the sight of the Winter Soldier with him. The two super soldiers walked with confident strides, their eyes calm. Reinhardt reached for the words he'd heard only once, trying to reach for his Russian. Longin. The Winter Soldier started shooting. Reinhardt's men started firing back, but Captain America raised his shield and blocked the hail of bullets. The sounds of bullets entering flesh, bouncing off vibranium and hitting fluorescent lighting and drywall, filled the hallway. In an instant, the terrifying effectiveness of the super soldier's plan became clear. Barnes would simply fire with his exceptional skill, and Rogers would block any attack that came their way. A brute tactic, but simple, one that led to 5 soldiers dying under the Winter Soldier's aim. "Grenade!" one of Reinhardt's men yelled, tossing the frag. "No, you fool!" Reinhardt cried, turning to sprint as fast as he could. Rogers snatched the grenade out of the air and tossed it back with lightning speed. Reinhardt and those of his men who'd followed his retreat heard the explosion behind them. "Down!" the lead soldier yelled as they ran into the stairwell. He halted, horrified at what he saw, and Reinhardt leaned over to see what had stopped him. The stairs leading down had been blocked by giant green crystals. "The monster?" Reinhardt said in horror. Suddenly a loud sound came from behind them. They looked to see that 2 women had joined Barnes and Rogers. Both were tall, buxom and dressed in military uniforms. One carried only a knife, which she had stabbed into a soldier. The other had a pair of batons in hand, which she was using to beat a man like a drum. The Winter Soldier lifted an overzealous soldier with his robotic arm and tossed him through a wall. Captain America tossed his shield, and the invulnerable object slammed off a soldier into a wall, into another man, and back to Rogers. Up! The lead soldier rushed upwards, Reinhardt and the last of his soldiers rushing to join him. They ran up 2 flights and exited a different door. The floor they were on now was dedicated to research, with every door leading to laboratories. As they ran, a noise could be heard from within those labs, a noise Reinhardt had memorized, the sound of a repulsor beam. They ran faster. "The Avengers," Reinhardt spat, "shields, pets, superhumans, all in force for me, sir." Down the hall, a man with dark skin waved at them, and Reinhardt felt his usual calm return at the sight of the man. "Over here!" Bakshi. Reinhardt and his soldiers joined his trusted second-in-command. "I'm glad to see you safe, sir," Bakshi said with a tight smile. "We'll escort you both to the rooftop," the lead soldier said. Bakshi joined them, and everyone ran. S.H.I.E.L.D. came in from the lower floors, and they're letting their superhumans clear everyone out as their soldiers do cleanup. "I'll have to mention that to von Strucker," Reinhardt mentioned. "Quite the effective tactic." "Will we rendezvous with him?" Bakshi asked. "We will have to," Reinhardt smirked as they entered an elevator together. "If von Strucker remembers the man who put him where he is, I believe we will be all right." Bakshi leaned against the wall of the elevator and smirked. "Well, I wouldn't count your chickens just yet." Reinhardt, who had been watching the doors close, had enough time to look at Bakshi, confused at his sudden casualness. Then a hand grabbed the right door of the elevator. A hand that began to change color to match the elevator door, going from skin-colored to steel. One of the soldiers slammed the butt of his rifle into the hand as it pulled the door, and received nothing for it. Another hand joined the first, and the doors were ripped out of their holdings, tossed aside. The soldiers fired on the figure in front of them. Karl Creel smiled, bullets bouncing off his steel skin like Nerf darts. He stepped inside and picked up one of the soldiers, beginning to squeeze on his throat. "Wait!" Reinhardt yelled. The soldiers stopped shooting. Creel looked at Reinhardt, who smiled smugly. "Now, Mr. Creel, listen very closely. Take a deep breath. Calm your mind." Reinhardt smiled when Creel dropped the soldier, staring at him. "You know what is best. What is best is you comply. Compliance will be reward. Creel slapped Reinhardt in the face. The Hydra leader hit the wall behind him and turned back with a stinging cheek to stare at a grinning Creel. What do you think, Barton? Should I comply? Bakshi shook his head. Nah, I think you're good. Reinhardt had enough time to look at Bakshi before the man kicked a soldier in the knee, jab another in the throat, and drop a gun from his sleeve that he shot at another. Creel moved slightly slower, but lashed out as well, throwing one man out of the elevator and kicking another. Reinhardt sighed sadly as the last soldier fell to the ground. He stood up straight and faced Creel, then looked at Bakshi, who removed his face to reveal that of Clint Barton, the Avenger known as Hawkeye. I suppose, Reinhardt said, smiling. I am caught, yes? Creel and Barton shared a look. I will, of course, cooperate fully. Reinhardt held out his hands. I'm sure you all have many questions. I'm happy to answer them, he chuckled. In a way, this will be good for both S.H.I.E.L.D. and me. Our experiments will be most useful. Does he always talk like that? Clint asked. All creepy-like? Spooky experimentation. For as long as I've known him, Creel pulled a small pistol from behind his back and pointed it at Reinhardt. What are you? The Hydra leader stopped when he saw something. A smoky image of a man unseen by Barton or Creel, a man with a shaved head, blue eyes with a monocle over his right eye, and a tall build. Reinhardt's eyes widened. Struck. Creel shot Reinhardt in the chest with an ICER bullet, the tranquilizing effect of the weapon knocking Reinhardt out instantly. Let's get the mad scientist into a cell, Clint said. Both heroes collected their prisoner, and bridge agents joined them. The apparition shook his head. As he vanished, he said one word. Useless. Wolfgang von Strucker. Von Strucker opened his eyes and scowled. He was sitting in a meditative style on a stone floor, in a room of a castle in North America. The current leader of Hydra was wearing a blue polo shirt and black pants, and had removed his shoes to sit more comfortably. He cracked his back and shook his head, reaching a hand up to rub his eyelids. No luck. Wolfgang looked to his right. A man stood there watching him. He had slicked back hair and was wearing a black turtleneck. The man had a smug look on his face. I'm guessing the old man wasn't willing to listen? I did not have the chance to try, von Strucker looked up at the man. He was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, who have new members, one of whom is Creel. Shit, the man shook his head, stepping into the room to begin pacing. That's a kick in the ass we didn't need. Bluntly stated, but not untrue. Von Strucker lifted the device in his lap up. We are not just desperate, Garrett. We are dying. Yish! All of you legacies are always so dire, John Garrett watched as his ally rose up. Things are tough, but we can still get past it, you know, one head, yada yada. When that is repeated as we lose, it fails to have any meaning. Garrett chuckled at the stone-faced von Strucker. Now, see, that's quitter talk. No, I am acknowledging our desperation. It is the only reason I decided to release this thing from containment. And I am still not sure why I allowed you to convince me to do so. Because it was the only choice we had, Garrett shook his head. The Avengers are coming, and so is S.H.I.E.L.D. They're going to find ways to counter us. So we need to use all the toys we've got. Von Strucker sighed, nodding after a moment. Yes, he looked down at his hand, where a short staff ending in two blades that held a glowing blue orb between them. The hand was protected by a metallic glove, with a solid orange color to it. Hail Hydra, for better or for worse. Till death do us part, Garrett said with a smile. January 12th, Wolfgang von Strucker listened on a S.H.I.E.L.D. channel with a neutral look on his face, as Steve Rogers continued to give his speech. They could be standing right next to you. They almost have what they want with the help of the inside helicarriers. Absolute control. This is bad, Dr. List. An older man with dark skin and white hair hissed to von Strucker. Von Strucker sighed at the words of his second-in-command. Doctor, I hired you for your intelligence. Please do not state the obvious. He looked towards the two cells in the back of the room. The Maximoff twins were testing their powers again. The boy Pietro was rushing back and forth in his cell, a mere white blur whenever he wasn't simply staring out at them. The girl Wanda was calmer, She sat on the floor, constantly spinning the energy in her hands around until there seemed to be an orb of red light in her lap. Frankly, both twins worried him. Their intensity, the strength of their powers, the clear instability of the children was all a cause for concern. As of now, all loyal S.H.I.E.L.D. agents should be getting a program on their phones, Rogers said on the channel. List took out his phone, Strucker and several others in the lab doing the same. That's when Strucker began to realize how bad things had truly gotten. His cell phone was dead. Looking around, so were all the other ones. The computers had also been disconnected from any internet connection. "What is happening?" Dr. List asked. "Standard tactics, Dr. List. Remove your enemy's communications, take their information, identify them to your allies." Strucker clenched a fist. "We need to move now." "Where?" Dr. List asked. "Where should we go?" "Anywhere," Strucker shook his head. "This Hercules app," Strucker had to admire the name. "It will be our downfall if we let it. We must stop using any bases that have ever been in a S.H.I.E.L.D. database." Strucker looked around. "Pack now! I want the entire base empty of anything useful in 1 hour. Kill all S.H.I.E.L.D. members, the ones we kept to stave off suspicion." The soldiers and technicians around him began moving immediately. "Do you really believe we are in any danger?" Dr. List asked. "More danger than we have ever been in," Strucker scowled. "First, we must—" "Sir," a soldier came down a hall running towards Strucker. He held a smartphone that was glowing green. "Sir, we need to—" A red beeping came from the phone. The soldier, a young man with dark black skin and well-cut hair, had time to stare at the phone in horror. Then Strucker shot him in the face. "Damn!" Strucker watched the body fall, the Glock 19 in his hand lowering. He was a good soldier. Strucker kept walking. "First, we must kill any other S.H.I.E.L.D. members on base. Luckily, we are mostly Hydra, but we can't allow our enemies to know about the twins, the Chitauri armor, or the scepter. Then we destroy the base." List nodded sadly. "Yes, I see what you're saying. From there, we must establish communications with the other cells," Strucker scowled. S.H.I.E.L.D. was somehow able to hack my phone, a device of my own design, despite all of my defenses against hackers. This is despite all of our experimentation into AI, which means that Stark's own must be involved. We need allies, we need resources, and we need information. Some of his soldiers ran around the pair as they walked, saluting briefly. They ran into a hall as Strucker continued, and soon the sound of gunshots echoed through the area as S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel died. "Understood," List said. 3 hours later, flying over his base in a Quinjet, von Strucker stared down at the place that had once been his home, a large mansion in the middle of the German countryside, surrounded by beautiful grasslands. He stood in the back of the Quinjet with the door open, the wind rushing around him as he watched his people float nearby in their own aircraft, tanks and Humvees driving away. With some sadness in his heart, he raised the detonator in his hand. "Pity I'd just decorated my office to my specifications." Strucker flipped the switch. Boom! Explosions rocked throughout the mansion. As Strucker watched, the Quinjet rocked gently from the shock waves of the controlled destruction. He turned away, looking at those in the Quinjet. "We will not let this stop us. I refuse to let it. Fly to America and let us start this war in earnest." "Hail, Hydra!" the men in the Quinjet said in unison. With that, Strucker's fleet took to the skies as his vehicles headed to the coast. Upon reaching the United States, Strucker found only frustration. "All communications are still shut down," List told him as they flew over the country. They were staring at a screen in the Quinjet, trying to find help. "Fuel will become an issue soon as well. We need to land. We need to find our people." "Dr. List, you've gained a habit of saying the obvious that I can't seem to appreciate," Strucker said with a growl. "Show them to me again." List tapped at the screen. "Luckily, we can still watch the news, even if we can't talk to anyone. According to what I've managed to compile, they're called Dial and Falcon, as far as can be told. A human who can turn into aliens and a soldier who flies with an experimental jetpack. On the screen, Falcon was diving out of a crystal mountain to fly past enemy Quinjets. The video changed to show him outmaneuvering gunships with acrobatic ease, twisting and flipping through the air with more maneuverability than any aircraft could match, his wings letting him change direction in ways even the Iron Men could not. Then a series of photos showing several alien creatures, the most prominent being the image of a helicarrier glowing black with green circuitry. Strucker shook his head. Fascinating, both of them. The skill of that flyer gives me several ideas for our own forces. That alien, however, the fact the Avengers are now chasing us, is bad enough without the addition of other heroes coming out of the shadows and aiding them. If anything, these revelations helped Strucker with any doubts over his current course of action. They needed muscle, and he knew just where to get it. Strucker turned towards the pilot. "Are we almost there?"
"Yes, sir," the pilot said. "We're 20 minutes out."
"Are you sure about this, von Strucker?" List asked. "They were captured for a reason." "I am grasping at straws, Dr. List. The entire world is chasing us, and I must gather tools to fight against them. I thought this to be an age of miracles, but I was wrong. This is an age of monsters. I should have realized that." Strucker sighed. "Prepare the twins." List and the Hydra soldiers around them stared at him. "Sir," List said, shocked, "are you—" "No, I am not," Strucker spat out, his eyes flashing. "But I will survive this, no matter the cost." In a military base in Alaska, a U.S. Army soldier stood to watch at his station. Things had been routine that day. Get up, eat, guard, eat, guard. He stood inside his guard tower in his uniform, watching the icy tundra around him, as he worked at the computers around him, checking radar sensors and listening to his headset. For a moment, he enjoyed the calm monotony of the work. Then he saw the aircraft on his radar. The soldier reached for his headset and sent a signal. "Unidentified aircraft, identify yourselves." The soldier listened to static for a moment. When no response came, he switched channels to contact the base commander. "Sir, this is Guard Tower 2. We have incoming unidentified aircraft. Quinjets." "1 second," an unfamiliar voice responded in a strange accent. "I'll be right with you." Russian, maybe. Some sort of Eastern European. "This is a secure line. Who is this?" the soldier said, now immensely worried. A sudden explosion drew his attention. He spun in his chair and got up, quickly crossing to the other side of the guard tower to see where the commotion was coming from. The explosion had been from one of the hangars blowing up within the confines of the base. The soldier, now understanding they were under attack, took a moment to watch in horror as a woman in a red dress threw waves of some sort of scarlet energy at an incoming Humvee, tearing the vehicle to pieces. "Shit!" the soldier cried, running back to his station. He picked up his headset to contact to the mainland, only for the back of his jacket to get snatched in between rough hands. He was pulled back and tossed through the window. "Ah!" The last things he saw as he fell was a blue blur running to join the woman in red as a fleet of Quinjets flew over the fences to head towards the base in the distance. Just before he landed, the blue blur ran back to him, kicking him in the chest, breaking his ribs, but ironically also saving his life. Words on a sign flashed before him. "Barrow, Alaska." The vault. Von Strucker, Pietro Maximoff, the fastest mortal in the world, said the words with a flippancy that bothered the Hydra commander. "Welcome to the base. Want us to show you around?" "No need," Strucker looked around. "Your first battle with your powers, Pietro. How does it feel?" Pietro smiled darkly. "Brilliant. We're unstoppable." Quinjets landed in the courtyard of the base, and soldiers spilled out of them. Hydra men wearing Chitauri armor flew out of the vessels and took to the skies. List walked out to join Strucker, and Wanda walked over to join her brother. "Now, let us see our spoils, shall we?" Strucker asked, walking with the pair to enter the large cement-encased base through the massive steel doors that had been blown apart. Soldiers, both mundane and wearing Chitauri armor, followed. "You said this would help us kill the Avengers," Wanda said, giving Strucker a look. "What is it? A weapon?" "In a sense," Strucker admitted as they strode through the stone walls of the base. "They were both locked away here in 2010. One was even suggested as an Avengers candidate." "What? We're here for a person?" Pietro asked. "Yes, we are. Two of them, though I would be hard-pressed to call them people at this point. Strucker took a right, his soldiers, List and the twins following. You said one was an Avenger? Wanda asked, saying the word Avenger with disgust. Why would he help us? Only a candidate, never an actual Avenger. Strucker admitted, and in the end, he will help us for the same reason we are helping each other. We have the same goals. They went into a heavy-duty steel-reinforced elevator, and Strucker hit the button to go down. Now, how are you both feeling? Pietro and Wanda looked at each other, confused. Strucker rolled his eyes. This is, as I said, your first actual battle. How are you functioning? Have there been any issues with control? No, Wanda said softly, the Sokovian native raising a hand to let a small curl of red power float around her palm. Pietro eyed the soldiers when a couple clenched their weapons at the casual display. It feels natural. Strucker nodded and looked at Pietro. The young man scoffed. I'm fine. Good. The elevator doors opened and Strucker stepped out. We may need you soon. Walking down the concrete hallways, they soon came to a door. Strucker gestured, and one of the soldiers kicked it in, striding in with his gun raised. Two more went in, one of them wearing the glowing modified Chitauri armor. Several shots rang out, followed by screams. After a moment of waiting, one of them called out, "Clear!" Strucker nodded and walked inside, followed by the twins. Pietro and Wanda stopped in surprise when they saw the object in the center of the room. The entire room was surrounded by computers and whiteboards with formulas written on them. Scientists lay dead on the floor, and they stepped over their corpses. Strucker gazed at the equations for a moment, ignoring the object that dominated the center of the room. Dr. List, can you understand this? Let me see. List strode over and looked at the mathematics on the board. What is this? List stared at the numbers before him. It's brilliant, but mad as well. How can someone even comprehend this? I'll have to go over it for months. Or we ask him, Pietro said in his accented voice. Strucker finally looked at the object in the center of the room, a large oblong tube filled with green glowing fluid. The Geiger counter rested on the side of it, gently ticking and indicating low levels of gamma radiation. Inside was a figure. He was unconscious, floating gently in the green liquid of his tube. A man, rather short and skinny, unremarkable in his features until one noted his head. A head which had grown outwards, extending his forehead to give him a misshapen appearance. Project Mr. Blue, Pietro read off a clipboard nearby. Samuel Stearns, Strucker said. If the Hulk is the pinnacle of strength, then this man is the pinnacle of brilliance. What an unnatural creature. Why is he in there? Wanda asked. Because S.H.I.E.L.D. feared his intelligence, Strucker said softly. As do I, but I must take all the resources I can find. Strucker turned to his men. Take 6 of your men and prepare him to be moved. We have someone else to take with us. Someone like Stearns? Wanda asked. Not exactly. Strucker led his group to another door, and they went down several flights of stairs. He stopped when they came to a doorway, and looked at Pietro. Mr. Maximoff, please remove the weapons of the men behind the door. Miss Maximoff, you will be needed for the turrets. The twins nodded, Pietro smirking confidently as Wanda took a deep breath. Strucker opened the door, and Pietro disappeared, Wanda and the soldiers following. Army soldiers in green and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in black raised their weapons as they entered, 4 automated turrets spinning to aim at them. A blue blur ran amongst the 20 men in front of the large white tank in the back of the room. In seconds they had no weapons, allowing bullets and purple beams to kill the soldiers. When the automated turrets were about to fire, Wanda waved her hands in arcane motions, surrounding them in her power. The guns were covered in the same energy and rose up with a tearing sound as they were separated from their base. With another wave, the turrets were torn apart. Like that, the room was clear, leaving them all to stare at the white tank that dominated the room. Cold smoke drifted from pipes connected to the enormous tank, which was the size of a small truck at least. Through glass as thick as a forearm, they could see the being inside. Good Lord, List said moments later. He's giant, and damn ugly, Pietro added, awestruck. Emil Blancy, the abomination of Harlem, Strucker said as they gazed upon the being before them. The council suggested him as a possible avenger over the Hulk. Funny how blind they were. The resting face of Emil Blonsky was almost savage, even as it slept. Green, covered in thick skin and bony growths, hundreds of pounds of bone and muscle covered in spikes. A disgusting combination of a bodybuilder's muscle and a monster's body. "We'll transport him on one of the Quinjets," Strucker said firmly. "The Avengers have their Hulk, have their Iron Men and monsters. Now we will have ours." Strucker watched as the green-skinned man on the makeshift stretcher in the middle of the Quinjet slowly woke up. He'd been removed from his tube, but still had enough sedatives inside him that it had taken 30 minutes to wake him up. Peter and Wanda stood by his side as they looked down at him. Samuel Stearns blearily opened his eyes. After seeing those before him, he closed them again. "Hydra? Huh, I thought you were still hiding. No, it seems Pierce's plan has failed." All of this was said in a half-lucid murmur. Stearns sighed. "So you did know," Strucker said. "It was rumored that you were telepathic." Hardly. Stearns opened his eyes and looked around. "I'm simply observant, and very, very smart. Why have you taken me? Though I can make an obvious deduction. It is always good to be told directly." "Because I need advantages, Mr. Stern," Strucker said firmly, slightly annoyed by the man's ego. "S.H.I.E.L.D. has sent Hydra scattering to the winds. I wish to offer you the chance to join us." "Desperate," Stearns chuckled. "I can see how hesitant you are. Why come to find me when you don't even truly want my help?" Strucker scowled. This only seemed to amuse Stearns further. His green eyes gazed around the room. "Well, I think I will join you." "Just like that?" Pietro asked. "Not quite." Stearns began to rise up. When soldiers raised their weapons, Strucker held out a hand to stop them. Stearns got into a sitting position on the bed and looked out the window. "Communications are dead, are they?" "Interesting." Stearns looked at Strucker. "I haven't had true simulation in months. S.H.I.E.L.D. would knock me out for weeks, having me do their equations in 2-hour implements because they feared any longer would give me the chance to figure out means of escape. Of course, they weren't wrong." Stearns scowled. "I am not a calculator. I am a genius. The ideas in my mind, young man, are world-changing, and I wish to implement them. I've always been more curious than cautious, and that's only increased. I don't care about S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra. I don't care about your petty games. I want to change this world. Now, will you let me do that?" Strucker eyed him. "Possibly, but only if you help me, of course. Starting with my inability to communicate with my forces." Stearns laughed. "Deal, and I'll even help you convince Blonsky." Strucker glared at him. "How did you—" "Oh, please, like a man as desperate as you wouldn't take the abomination with him." Stearns frowned. "Abomination? You know what? I'd like a name like that, I think. Something very austere." Stearns held out a hand. "Well, do we have a deal?" For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Strucker shook Stearns' hand. As Stearns smiled, Strucker wondered if he was going to regret this. January 12th, the leader of the religious order within Hydra had gotten off lucky. While he had lost billions to the assault from S.H.I.E.L.D., he had been careful to make sure enough of his finances were not connected to Hydra or S.H.I.E.L.D. that he was still able to hide away with his daughter in a castle with his people. But he was still in danger. All smartphones owned by Hydra personnel had been tossed away when they realized how pervasive S.H.I.E.L.D.'s blackout on their technology had been. Every one of Malik's men was on edge. The Battle of the Triskelion was over by now, and they were all worried that at some point they would look into the horizon and see an Insight helicarrier in the distance, superheroes rushing towards them. How ironic that Hydra's greatest weapons would now be a part of their greatest nightmares. So Gideon sat in his study, staring at the fireplace and contemplating his issues. How was he going to deal with this? How to survive against this new threat? Even with his current resources, he had no real power anymore. No member of Hydra did. Should he just give up? Ask for leniency for his daughter, possibly? Gideon balked at this idea. After everything he had sacrificed for Hydra, everything it had given him, all in the name of bringing their founder home, how could he sacrifice all of that? But what choice did he have? Sir! Gideon's contemplation was cut off when an aide ran into the room. We have communications. Gideon stared at him. Who is it? Von Strucker, the aide said. He says he can bring everyone together. Gideon felt hope for the first time in hours. Samuel Stearns? Gideon asked through the microphone in the radio setup in an upper room in the castle. That is correct, Strucker answered. He has modified our radios to bypass the AI currently interfering with our forces. But we must move fast, Gideon. I need the phase harmonic teleporter. Gideon frowned. That is only meant for communications with the Confederacy, you know. That Von Strucker, if we use it for more than that. What is the point of limiting its usage if we all die? Strucker interrupted. With it we can move our forces with impunity. We can bring our people in and save them. Gideon looked around at the people in the room. He thought about that for a moment. Finally, he nodded. Okay, Strucker. The teleporter is at your alma mater, under General Fisher's orders before he was arrested. Steger, Hale, and her daughter will be there. We're on our way there then, Strucker said firmly. Whitehall sent a message to Hale through Stern's connection, hopefully something to calm her, and we'll go grab it. I have people I can test it with as well. General Hale fired her gun once more, her daughter throwing her chakram into a man's throat. She scowled as 2 more of her own men died at her hands. Good work. Thanks. Ruby was wearing her uniform, a form-fitting black costume made for ease of movement. The 14-year-old girl had hair dyed white and eyes the same color as her mother's. She looked at her mother as they ran through the halls of the Hydra Preparatory Academy. Are you sure about this, Mum? Betraying Hydra? Hale, an older woman with dark blonde hair wearing a military uniform, looked at her daughter as the teenager pulled one of her chakrams out of a man's body. Whitehall promised you would one day be the leader of Hydra, our greatest soldier, and now he wants to tear you apart and shove cybernetics and random DNA samples into you with no regard for if you'll survive or not. Ruby bit her lip, staring at her mother. Hale continued, despite the pain her words were causing her daughter. We can't trust Hydra, not anymore. But someone has promised to protect you, to train you. You may not become the leader of Hydra, but you'll become something just as great eventually. Hale breathed deeply. Come, sweetheart. We need to get out. Hale. The pair spun into cover on opposite sides of a hallway as bullets flew over their head. The Air Force general peeked out to see the headmaster of the school, a brown-haired man wearing glasses, surrounded by soldiers firing at her and her daughter. You must surrender, please. We can protect Ruby. We can stop S.H.I.E.L.D. When Whitehall has proven he doesn't give a damn about her, Hale yelled back, anger filling her. No, Steger. Hydra made its bed, now it's going to die in it. Damn, Ruby said, shocked by her mother's vehemence. Language, sweetheart, Hale said simply. Now, we should have our help in 20 seconds. You have the USB. Yes, Mom. Ruby rolled her eyes, utterly relaxed despite the bullets flying at her. Hale, Steger yelled. Please, just tell us you surrender and I will protect you. We can make a deal with Whitehall. Sorry, Steger, Hale yelled back. The next words were said with a quiet determination as she looked upon her daughter. But I've made my deal. A wall blew up down the hall behind Steger and his men. Soldiers rushed through the hole, shooting as fast as they could. Steger was shot in the chest by an ICER and fell to the floor in a moment. The same happened to his men, bullets and ICERs finishing them off quickly. Hale and Ruby poked their heads out, Hale coming out of cover when she saw the shield symbol on their uniforms. Ruby followed hesitantly. Ma'am, one of the soldiers said as she walked up, Fury sent us. We're to escort you to a Quinjet immediately. There's no time to grab the phase harmonic teleporter? Hale asked, worried. The what? The soldier said, shaking his head. Ma'am, there are more Hydra forces on their way. If we stay any longer, we risk you and your daughter. Hale froze, thinking. After a moment, she nodded. Understood. Let's go, she gave Steger a look. Let's bring him at least. He may be useful. Good idea. Wolfgang von Strucker. Strucker arrived at the Hydra Preparatory Academy only a couple of hours after Hale had escaped with her daughter. Disappointing, but at least S.H.I.E.L.D. had only sent a small team that could be chased off. Still, that meant that his current plan had to be moved up. In the meantime, he used the brief moment to rest. The Academy had fuel, food, soldiers, and aircraft, enough to help his fleet continue the fight. S.H.I.E.L.D. would come, but not before they could continue their plans. "I've refined the process," Stern said to List, as the gamma-irradiated scientist watched Loki's scepter move past them towards a research lab. "But I'm not sure about these mercenaries you wish me to use the process on. Haven't they already been enhanced?"
Yes, though they have not deigned to tell us how, List admitted, but some of our experimentation has indicated that already enhanced individuals may take to enhancements with more ease than others. Chan Ho Yin, an individual found by one of our subdivisions, was able to gain tremendous strength from the centipede serum. Don't forget Blonsky, whose use of the soldier serum only made gamma irradiation that much more effective on him for all his monstrous appearance. There is still value in creating enhanced of our own, but these four are perfect for testing our theory. "And they will let us test that on them?" Stearns asked, walking along with List. "As long as we pay them," List admitted. "Start with Davida. She's being sent out right now." "What?" Stearns turned to glare at List. "You want me to simply empower someone and send them to battle a second later? What sort of foolishness?" The S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy of Science and Technology, both men turned to see Strucker striding towards them. "We must send our forces there now. I want Davida to go with my men." "It's too reckless," Stearns snarled. "Simply empowering her and sending her off without testing, without—" "Sadly, we can't take any chances." Strucker narrowed his eyes at Stern. "Dr. Stearns, we need resources, more engineers and scientists to aid us, all of which are at that academy. The risk is worth it, and giving her every advantage we can beforehand mitigates those risks. Now empower her." Stearns glared at him as Strucker gave him a level look. Finally, the Garmin-enhanced scientist turned and strode off. "He's going to be a problem," List said softly. "Yes, he will," Strucker admitted, "but his intellect is too vast to be discarded. Keep an eye on him. If the device we implanted works, we can stave off any betrayals, but I will not have him turn against us." January 3rd. "Strucker, buddy," a man said over the radio connection. "How you doing?" "Surviving," Strucker said simply, looking around the radio room Garrett had loaned him. Stearns had, in a way, saved their lives. The man was not just brilliant, he was innovative. Some thought those were the same things, but there was a reason there were dozens of genius-level intellects, and only one Tony Stark. He'd even managed to enhance Davida in mere moments, deducing her new powers and helping her learn how to use them. He was useful, for now. He was also unbearably smug when the assault on the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy turned up nothing. Despite this, Strucker was still firm in the belief the assault had been a good choice. While the enemy had managed to counter the teleporter so that anyone sent to the Academy was simply bounced back with polka dot skin and swap genitals, Strucker had no idea what to think of that. He still had to make the attempt. After leaving the Hydra Academy with all the resources they could gather, Strucker guided his men to their new base of operations. Stearns had managed to help them get to Gideon Malik's home, a small castle in North America, without being found out, a place with enough land to hold all their forces. The man had even managed to create a device to hide them from satellites and radar, allowing Hydra to gather without fear. The radio was another invention of Stearns. He had not explained how or why it worked, his way of keeping himself invaluable, but the point was that the radio allowed Strucker to contact Hydra forces across the world without risk of being intercepted or tracked. The results of that had been depressing. The treehouse had been destroyed by one of Hydra's own enhanced. The sandbox had been taken by Hydra, only to be lost later on, though thankfully their scientists were on their way with an enhanced teenager that had been brainwashed. But everything else had been taken control of by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. But thankfully, the phase harmonic teleportation device, which was being called the fishhook by the grunts, had let them start grabbing and saving resources. And Stern's workaround for the communications was still working, though he'd had to rework it a couple of times.
Garrett, Strucker said, focusing, I am not calling to simply discuss the weather. How the hell are you calling me anyways? John Garrett asked. We've been having problems with that. I will explain when you get here, Strucker responded. You want us to meet, huh? We need to gather our resources, Strucker said. Well, I'll do it. I'm always willing to make friends, but I'm making a stop somewhere first. The fridge has some sweet toys I want to grab. Strucker rubbed his chin. Will you bring any of those with you? Only if you share, however. It is your talking with me. Garrett switched gears, becoming very serious. If this raid is going to work, I need comms. You have them, Strucker said. We need counters to the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D., especially to this dial that has appeared. Where are you? I'll send soldiers to join you. That'd be great, Garrett said instantly. Late at night, on a beach in an undisclosed location, the fridge stood tall. 100 stories, with only one door on the rooftop and no other way into the building, it was among the most imposing structures in the world. 2 guards watched the main door from inside a pair of thick glass doors, staring out at the dark night sky. As they watched, however, something fell onto the ground from out of nowhere, smashing into the roof with a crack of broken concrete. What the? One of the men stepped forward, staring at the object that had landed on top of a building that stood over 1,000 feet tall. Is that a woman? Where did she come from? The other guard said, concerned, looking up at the empty night sky. Suddenly, the woman rose to her feet. As the pair stared, she flipped her blonde hair behind her head and strode towards the door. She had long hair, a face that was beautiful but also strong, and an extremely fit form. She was wearing a green leather jacket zipped to the top, leather black jeans, and impractical high heels. She smirked as she came to the door, and both men stepped back, pointing their guns at her. She leaned against the glass, still smirking. Hey boys, mind letting a girl in? She said, her southern accent seductive and lilting. Who the hell are? What the fuck does that matter? The first soldier's partner said. This is a restricted location. No one should even be here. Miss, get down on the ground, now. Well, that is just plain mean, sugar, the woman said, pouting playfully. I guess I'll have to let myself in. She reared back and punched the bulletproof glass, shattering it with ease. Shit, enhanced, one of the men yelled, shooting his assault rifle at her, his partner joining in. For about a minute, they poured bullets into the woman. She let them for a moment, looking down as the bullets tore into her clothes, bouncing off her skin to land on the floor. Run, warn everyone. The other soldier headed to the elevator behind them. Running for it, he slammed on the button and looked back as the woman smacked his friend, sending flying into the wall. The elevator doors began to close as she rushed towards it, closing just before she reached. The elevator began to drop towards the lower floors. The soldier in the elevator breathed out a sigh, his heart beating like a drum, reaching for his comms. Control, we have an... Then some perfect manicured fingers pierced through the doors, followed by an arm. The elevator halted, stopped by the superhuman arm. As the motor whined and the steel around the arm crumbled, the soldier screamed into his comms, enhanced, attacking the fridge. Mayday, Mayday. Then the blonde woman ripped her way into the elevator. Moments later, a Quinjet landed on the roof, soldiers' Chitauri armor teleporting into existence at the same time. Helen, was it? John Garrett said as he strode through the halls of the fridge, smiling at the blonde woman next to him. Gotta say, I like your style. How strong are you exactly? Never really tested my limits, sugar, Helen said simply, clearly focused on other things. You really think David is in here? It would make sense. S.H.I.E.L.D. tends to keep its favorite prisoners here, Garrett said, striding confidently. He looked behind him. Go ahead and start killing anyone in our way with those golden boys, will you? The tall, imposing black man behind Garrett nodded, striding forward to join the Chitauri armored soldiers in wiping out the opposition in the fridge. What is that guy? Helen asked, as the tall man fired rockets from his arm. My very best friend, Garrett said flippantly. Come on, Strucker said we only have 20 minutes before S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out about us. What are we looking for exactly? Helen asked. Before Garrett could answer, a man came from a hallway on their left and shot at them. Helen leaped in front of the bullets and let them bounce off her chest, kicking the shield soldier's leg hard enough to shatter it. She grabbed him by the front of his armor, fingers tearing through Kevlar and steel to give her a firm grip, and tossed him upwards, the man smashing into the ceiling with bone-crushing force. He fell to the floor unconscious. "Damn," Garrett said, impressed. "Nice work, but you forgot one thing." Garrett shot the soldier in the head. "Can't leave witnesses. Had to kill those two you left upstairs as well." Ignoring the shocked look on Helen's face, Garrett continued, "Gonna be a good day." While Garrett and his men emptied the fridge, more work was being done elsewhere. In the castle grounds of Malik's home, in a courtyard illuminated by spotlights, Hydra was preparing for its next recruitment. Strucker watched as his scientists and engineers worked around Blonsky's massive tank. They removed the pipes on the tank and worked on the software of the cryogenics on it, stepping on the cobblestone floor as the stars shone down on them. Men in Chetatari armor floated over the courtyard, their purple glow flitting about, and more soldiers with conventional weaponry surrounded the area. 2 sonic cannons rested to the east and west of the tank, as well as vehicles with heavy assault weaponry around them. "It'll be nice to speak to Emil again," Stearns said, walking up to join Strucker. Strucker looked at Stearns, noting the orange jacket he had found somewhere. It clashed with his green skin. But then, a man with a head as enlarged as Stearns wouldn't worry as much about appearance. "I was always curious to see how his change affected his mind. We can only hope he listens to reason." Strucker looked at Wanda and Pietro. "Stay ready. We may need you." Pietro nodded quickly. Wanda was far more hesitant, and Strucker looked at them for a moment. Ever since they'd gone to the base in Alaska, he'd worried about the two. The two hadn't killed any soldiers themselves, but once adrenaline had faded from everyone's systems, they seemed racked with anxiety over those who had died. He'd have to be careful about them, but for now, a massive noise filled the air. Everyone looked at the tank, where a dent had been smashed from the inside on the door. "What are you doing?" Strucker yelled. "We aren't awakening him yet." "It's not us," the scientist cried out. "He's just the scientist screeched when another dent was struck in the door. "Pietro, get them out of there!" Strucker cried out. The door flew out of the tank, and the massive being within leaped out. He reached for a scientist, and a blue blur sped throughout the area for 30 feet around the tank. The being's fist closed on nothing, and the scientists and engineers were safely away as Pietro screeched to halt next to his sister. "Wanda!" Stearns yelled, preempting Strucker. "Be ready!" The being looked around as guns ranging from armor-piercing to laser-blasting pointed at him, 2 sonic cannons joining in. He snorted, seemingly amused. When he spoke, it was in a voice like gravel rolling down a hill. "So, this is the best you could bring to kill me. You'll need 1,000 more. So why would we try to kill you?" Stearns yelled out, stepping forward. Blonsky spun to look at Stearns. He narrowed his eyes at him. You're that scientist. The one who helped you become this magnificence." Stearns' voice sounded almost euphoric. "Look at the power you have now." "Yeah, thanks. Though it looks like I'm not the only one who's gone through some changes," Emil noted, rising to his full height. "What do you want?" "For you to help us," Stearns said simply. "Ha ha ha." Emil stepped forward, ignoring the guns pointed at him as he strode forward. "Why should I? Why don't I simply kill you all?" "The Hulk." Stearns frowned when Strucker spoke from the back. When Emil looked at Strucker, the monocled man stepped forward. "We will help you find him and kill him." Stearns spun to glare at Strucker, but sighed and turned back to Blonsky. "Yes, we will help you kill Bruce Banner," he added, the last reluctantly. "Join us, and we will make sure no one ever cages you again." No, I think not." Blonsky leaped forward, smiling gleefully. A blue blur pulled Stearns and Strucker back. Undeterred, Blonsky jumped towards them with a sick grin on his face. "Wanda!" Stearns and Strucker yelled in unison. A red energy smashed into Emil in midair, pushing him back with a surprised look on his horrific face. He flew into his old tank, destroying it. Emil rose up hurriedly, staring as Wanda stepped forward, her hands glowing with power. We know how to find the man you wish to kill, Strucker said, walking next to her. The Hulk has a team now. Individuals as exceptional as you are that you have no chance of defeating alone, not when their numbers will let them outmatch even your exceptional power. We can provide a team for you as well. People to fight alongside, leave you to battle the Hulk to your content. Emil listened, calming. I promise you, Emil Blonsky, Stern said, walking up to join Strucker and Wanda as they stood across from the monster before them. You will never find a better way to prove your power than with our resources. We can make you a legend. Well, now that is an offer, Emil smiled, his horrific features twisting. First thing, I'm hungry, and I want her to make me a sandwich. Wanda blinked when he pointed at her. Her eyes narrowed, and she gathered more energy before her fingers as an answer. Ha! Feasty! I suppose I'll agree. He rose out of the tank and cracked his neck to the side. But when I kill the Hulk, all bets are off. January 14th. The next morning, Strucker was there with his soldiers to greet John Garrett when he and his men landed on the grounds outside Gideon Malik's castle. Men in Chitauri armor landed on the ground at the same time as 4 Quinjets, joining their brethren. The closest Quinjet to Strucker opened its back door to expel Garrett. The former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent stepped out with a salesman's smile and outstretched arms. Strucker, look at you. Healthy as ever, well except the bags under your eyes. Strucker smiled tightly. Indeed. How was the raid? Went off like a charm, Garrett said, his smile widening further. Got a whole lot of new toys, even a few recruits. Even managed to get my girl Flowers out of prison on the way. Garrett nodded to a woman in the background who was wearing a red silk dress. She sat in a Quinjet, hands in her lap as she watched the proceedings. She can help create more of the centipede serum for us. Men in brown uniforms with black vests filed out of the Quinjets, carrying weapons and equipment with casual ease no human strength could match. Their eyes glowed subtly red as they walked, a consequence of the centipede serum in their veins, and Garrett watched as other soldiers in black uniforms joined them. Excellent, Strucker said, watching the soldiers line up behind Garrett, a tall black man Strucker knew as Deathlock, taking a spot at his right side. Helen walked out of the Quinjet and moved to stand with Strucker. Thing is, though, Garrett's smile became more dangerous. I'm not sure if I should give them to you. The Chitauri armored soldiers tensed, facing the centipede-enhanced men and women across from them. Strucker and Garrett's armies faced each other. Helen's eyes started to get slightly redder. Deathlock's right arm opened to reveal a weapon within. Perhaps you need an incentive, Strucker raised a hand and snapped his fingers. A massive green figure flew from the castle and landed behind Strucker like a missile. Holy shit, Garrett yelled, stepping back as the abomination stood up with a smirk. A blue blur suddenly appeared next to Helen. Finally, 2 figures flew down from the sky. Wanda flew on jets of her power, coming to a stop behind Pietro. Stern simply floated on a disc, hovering on jets of purple energy, his arms crossed while he looked at the battlefield. Satisfied, Garrett? Strucker asked. Things were tense for a moment longer. Then Garrett smiled, the cyborg next to him relaxing. Oh yeah, I am absolutely satisfied. Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch. Pietro, what are we doing here? Wanda asked her brother later. She was sitting on a bed with her back to a stone wall, eyes on her brother as he looked out the window with his arms crossed. He looked at her, then back out of the window, getting revenge. I'm not so sure of that anymore. The pair had been given a room in the castle to themselves. It was more expensive than any home they'd ever lived in, with beautiful art on the walls, silk sheets, and a beautiful view of the countryside. Wanda watched as her brother continued to stare out the window. After a moment, he spoke. He's going to help us kill Tony Stark, to kill the Avengers, he said with conviction. And then, Wanda asked curiously, he said nothing, any righteousness fading. He has brought monsters here. We've been responsible for killing people. I'm not so sure of what we're doing here, Pietro. Her brother frowned in thought. He shook his head after a while. We will stay until the Avengers are dead. Then we leave. Go back home. And if he decides not to let us, he had nothing to say to that. We can't do this, Pietro. Whatever we are doing here, it isn't what we wanted for ourselves. I think we need to plan our escape. Downstairs, other people were dealing with certain issues at the same time. The twins were dealing with their consciences. Fascinating, Stearns said, watching the objects gathered from the Hydra Academy and the raid on the fridge get brought into the large room that had been turned from a spare kitchen into a laboratory. The items were placed at the side of the room, which was full of tables, computers, and counters. These items will skyrocket my research and make it so I don't have to do everything from scratch. Yeah, there's some cool stuff here, Garrett said flippantly, biting into a piece of beef jerky. Yes, cool stuff, Stearns responded, annoyed. He turned to look at Garrett. Must you be here? Hey, I'm the one who brought the stuff you're so gaga over, Garrett said, putting a hand on his chest. You could stand to be a little nicer. Scoffing, Stearns looked over at a cage in the background. I'm nice to those who are worthy of it, and you have yet to prove yourself worthy of anything more than being a delivery boy. In the meantime, I have to work on the girl. Girl? Garrett looked towards the cage and blinked. The girl in the cage was glaring out at them. She was in her late teens, thin from lack of proper nutrition, wearing a white prison jumpsuit. Her black hair was matted, and her eyes were wild. She was yelling in Spanish, shaking her cage as best as she could. Damn Spitfire, ain't she? Garrett asked, eyeing her as one would a caged animal. More than that, Stearns said. She killed 3 of our men when we tried to transport her. That little thing, Garrett grinned. She got laser eyes or something? No, she was, according to records at the Hydra Academy, taken from Mexico when she was a toddler. She was found surrounded by the bodies of dead gang members who had killed her mother, Stearns idly said. Shit, Garrett responded seriously, suddenly much more wary of the prisoner. Indeed, Hydra got their hands on her but soon found that another group was trying to take her as well. She was brought to the academy, taken to the depths of the school, and found to have increased ability to absorb combat skills, as well as naturally enhanced speed, strength, and senses. Even her healing is enhanced, Stearns said, sounding absolutely fascinated. Garrett froze, and Stearns pretended not to notice. Lucky we found this, Black Sky. She would have died in months under the care of those ingrate scientists at the academy. What do you mean? Garrett asked. They were planning to dissect her after finding she was resistant to being trained. Stearns turned away and watched as a large object was wheeled into the room, a tube big enough to contain a human. I have other plans for her. Using these, Stearns turned and lifted something for Garrett to look at. He blinked. Now that is one big-ass diamond. It isn't diamond, you troglodyte. Stearns hefted the cracked piece of blue-green crystal. No, it is far more durable than any known substance on the planet, besides vibranium and, despite all appearances to the contrary, organic. This, Mr. Garrett, may be step 1 in my research. But first, Stearns looked around at the soldiers surrounding him. I have something I wish to confirm. She wasn't there, Helen hissed at Strucker as they walked through the hallways together. Davida is still with S.H.I.E.L.D. Yes, and I am trying to discover where she is as per our deal, Strucker said, moving quickly. But even Stearns hasn't been able to get through the AI S.H.I.E.L.D. is using to defend their files, at least without him starting anything that would bring their eyes upon us. I suspect she is being held on the inside helicarriers. Then my girls and I can get her, Helen said without a second thought. You will fight the Avengers then. We can take them. No one can take them. Strucker stopped spinning to look at her. I have an army, I have superhuman soldiers, miracles and monsters, but the Chetari armor cannot defeat Iron Man. My monster cannot fight the Hulk or Dale on his own. My super soldiers are worthless against Captain America. We are outmatched, and we need more. Strucker yelled into the stubborn woman's face. The two stared at each other in the stone hallway. You're afraid, Helen accused. I'm pragmatic. S.H.I.E.L.D. has the quality to defeat our quantity, but I am building those numbers. And Stern has an idea. 3 targets he wants to kidnap. People who can help us take the helicarriers and perhaps even the Avengers head-on. Who? Sir. The two turned to see List walking towards them hurriedly. Stearns is making something he wishes us to look at. Gamma radiators. What? Strucker said, shocked. He thinks we can make more like the Hulk. Strucker thought about that. Fast, too fast. Stearns was trying to accelerate everything. Perhaps Strucker could use that to his advantage. He is certain. Yes. Then tell him he's authorized. Oversee the project and make sure to have Deathlock, Abomination and Wanda on standby. Ask our soldiers to volunteer. You think anyone will? Helen asked. Strucker looked at her, then continued his walking. Many in this world would sacrifice for the slightest bit of power, and the Hulk and Abomination represent more than a little bit of power. I have also, List continued, following with Helen, begun the construction of the cybernetics as per the cybertech designs. I'm also having our scientists look at the centipede serum with the girl Raina. Then we will have an army enough to fight against the Avengers, Strucker said firmly, a small smile coming to his face. Tell me about the other projects. January 15th. Your project needs work, Stearns, Strucker said as he stood in the laboratory of Stearns. The gamma-irradiated scientist smiled. Yes, but I have simply found what doesn't work, and that is progress. They were looking at the results of Stearns' experiments, men and women in cages within a large tent set up on the grounds. 11 in all, 4 women and 7 men, all of them in too much pain to move. 2 of the women and 4 of the men had green skin after the experimentation, their bodies misshapen and twisted, muscles on their bodies growing and shrinking at random as they screamed in pain and horror. Strucker could hear their bones snapping over and over as they shattered under the immense pressure of their own muscles' strength before healing back, only to break again. Some of them had even grown strange appendages, tentacles from their arms and legs, while one of the women had a leg turned to a long stump of flesh. The gamma radiators proved what I've always suspected. Bruce and I are not accidents. We are genetically built to accept gamma radiation, to be empowered by it. Emal Blonsky does not have the gene naturally, but the super soldier serum he was given, as crude as it was, allowed him to become what he is now, Stearns said with a grin. And you believe you have isolated the gene? Strucker asked. Stearns, in answer, turned to leave the tent and walked out. Strucker followed after an annoyed scowl at Stearns' arrogance. Stearns led him to another tent where they found several people waiting inside as they worked around 2 patients on tables. 2 is now stable, Stearns said firmly. 1 already injected with the centipede serum while having the gene, the other using Abomination's blood as a catalyst. I suppose that would be her, Strucker said, nodding towards the massive being on one table. Yes, Rana Phillips, Stearns confirmed. The woman in question looked like a more slender and female version of Blonsky. She had the same enormous muscles, the same hard exterior and dark green coloration, slightly glowing eyes, and seemed to maintain her hair though it had become green in color. She was awake and lucid, looking around at the scientists experimenting on her. As they watched, she shrank until she had become a normal human woman, with brown hair, green eyes, and a fit form, if not as impressive as she had been before. Such control, Strucker noted with a raised eyebrow. But she is not as powerful as a result, Stearns noted. Still, a stable result is good. The other is odd, however. Stearns nodded towards a man who was asleep on the other side of the tent. The man was green, but he seemed to grow and shrink at random, much like the victims in the other tent. Unlike them, he was at peace. Drugged? Strucker asked. Hardly. No, this is apparently how his powers manifest. As it is, I'm not sure if he can control it, especially with his feeble personality. What do you mean? Strucker asked. Benjamin Tibbets is not a strong person, unlike Rana, Stearns explained. He volunteered to become powerful. Did you know he is not even Hydra? He begged to defect from S.H.I.E.L.D. rather than die. Strucker blinked, but S.H.I.E.L.D. was winning. As I said, Strucker, he is not a strong person, physically or mentally, and I fear that will interfere somewhat in his usefulness. Rendir, however, proves that the process is useful, and I can at least suggest using the others as cannon fodder. As for candidates, I believe I have a perfect one in mind. Very well, Strucker decided. And the other experiment? I did not begin it yet, Stearns admitted. I wished to make sure that one worked perfectly. Despite the positive results garnered here, I do not wish to waste any more soldiers, especially since the black sky is so valuable. Black sky, Strucker mused quietly. I thought that creature was dead. Almost, Stearns smiled. But don't worry, she is undergoing the Faustus method now. Soon she shall be ours, and then I will enhance her to be a perfect warrior. Very well. In the meantime, have Rana test with Davida's team. I wish to see how powerful she really is. Understood, Stearns said. Somehow he sounded almost mocking. Strucker noted that, and looked over at the young woman watching Rena Phillips transform back into her monstrous form with a fascinated glimmer in her eyes. She'd come with Garrett, who insisted on calling her Flowers despite her preference for her actual name, Rena. She had short black hair that fell in artful curls around her pretty face and carried herself with the sort of vulnerability that screamed for people to care for her, which only made Strucker distrust her more. Has she been helpful? Strucker asked as Stearns watched her as well. Yes, but worryingly so, Stearns said. She has the air of a fanatic. She can't seem to stop staring at the Maximovs, and even Blonsky has drawn an admiring glance where many would shy their gaze away. A fan of Enhanced? Strucker asked. More that she covets powers similar to them, Stearns replied. Strucker frowned. After a moment he turned around. I'll speak to her later. Keep me apprised. Hours after Stearns' projects had started in earnest, Strucker received horrible news. Whitehall is being attacked, List said to Strucker later. Von Strucker, Gideon Malek, and Garrett had been perusing files together, planning their next attack strategy when List came into the room. Strucker looked up at List, shocked. Are you sure, List? We've been cut off from communications with his people, and reports have come in from social media that vehicles with an odd version of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s symbol have shown up at the building, List confirmed. Damn, Garrett cursed. We could use that old man and his people. Has anyone been able to get through? Malik asked, his jowls tightening when List shook his head. Then it is them. We haven't been able to communicate during dedicated S.H.I.E.L.D. raids. The second they start actually trying to keep us out, we must find a way, Strucker decreed. There is one, Garrett said. When the room looked at him, he smiled. Well, you've been working on it, haven't you? List told me about that little claw of yours. When Strucker glared at List, the man sighed in annoyance. He overheard me designing it. Astral projection, right? Garrett asked. Sounds like a neat trick. An unproven trick, Strucker said firmly. Theorized by Stearns after his brief work enhancing Davida's team. But you think it can bypass the communications blackout? Malik asked. Strucker froze, thinking. After a while he nodded slowly. Yes, Stearns theorized it to be possible. Well? Garrett asked. It's too dangerous, Strucker said. Even for all the things we are dealing with, even as desperate as we are. That's right, Garrett interrupted, his voice smooth and calm. Desperate? We're dealing with S.H.I.E.L.D., and they're attacking one of our oldest leaders. We need to fight back, Strucker. We need to know what we're dealing with. We can't do it the normal way. You've to reach out for whatever you can take. You know, I'm kinda glad we've been getting our asses handed to us. When those in the room stared at him, Garrett smiled his insincere smile. Come on, look at what we've got around us. Blonsky, Stearns, those crazy twins, Deathlock, those wrestling girls, all of the kinds of super soldiers we've got running around. In a few days, we've made an army more powerful than any in Hydra's history. I think we've been making a mistake, holding back as long we have. S.H.I.E.L.D. pushing us the way we have has only let us unleash our full potential. Garrett's voice seemed to draw them all in. Why stop now, Strucker? When you're so close to really making our dreams come true? Strucker thought about that. After a moment, he removed his coat, revealing the blue polo shirt he wore beneath it. Bring the claw and the scepter to the meditation room. It's time I tested it. Later, Strucker explained what had happened to Whitehall, Garrett, Malik, and List listening closely. When he was done, Malik shook his head. Damn shame. The old man had style. Wait, you thought he was old too? How long has Whitehall been alive? Garrett asked, everyone else ignoring him. S.H.I.E.L.D. has clearly gotten over whatever has paralyzed them, even to the point of using the Winter Soldier and Carl Creel in their forces. Strucker said. For now, I suggest we continue our efforts on increasing our forces. Stern has 4 targets he wishes to recruit to our cause. Enhanced? Garrett asked. Only one of them, an assassin shield used, List said. 2 of the others are shield agents. The last is related to an avenger. That could be disastrous, Malik said, walking to a nearby table to pour himself a glass of scotch. Shield is already on guard, attacking 3 of their own, and 1 related to an avenger. They're exactly what we need, List said. 1 has the gamma gene. The other 2 are prime candidates for the super soldier serum, especially with the vials Garrett has given us. You've done something with that alien juice? Garrett asked. Despite trying to sound casual, Strucker noticed the eagerness he hid. That girl, Raina, has some ideas, List smiled slowly. I believe, combined with the alien crystals, we may be onto something remarkable. And we can breath, for now, I believe, Strucker said. We'll take the targets, but after that, we focus on our army, on strengthening them. You want to hide? Garrett asked, visibly disappointed. For a short time, Strucker said. We need to breathe, I'm afraid. The soldiers have been pushed hard for 3 days. None of us has slept, and I can see it affecting our forces. We rest, rebuild our resources and operations, find a way to combat the incessant AI Shield is using, enhance our troops, and figure out our next step. Tomorrow, we take our targets. After that, we work from the shadows. Fine by me. Garrett walked over to where Malik had poured a drink to take a cup as well. Let's party, shall we? Malik sighed, shaking his head at Garrett. Very well, then I suggest in the meantime you keep an eye on Stearns. We're depending on that man for far too much. I believe getting rid of him once his usefulness is up would be in our best interest. Stearns raised an eyebrow as he continued to work, listening in on the conversation through a comm unit in his ear. Smart man. I agree, Strucker admitted, but for now he is helping us build an impressive force. Which he started building by turning 11 soldiers into mutated freaks who can't even function. Garrett noted. I'll watch him as much as I can, but in the end we may not be able to do him. Strucker admitted. As he did, he made sure his eyes narrowed on every single person in the room. He conveyed, as best as he could, that none would comment otherwise. They seemed to understand in a moment. Stearns was intelligent. Very, very intelligent. That intelligence, however, came with an ego and a lack of true experience, an inability to recognize another's skills at times, such as realizing a spy would know when a room had been bugged. The gamma-irradiated scientist was useful, but Strucker would not let that stop him from doing what needed to be done. Now, I must go speak with one of my new soldiers. Strucker turned and left, several guards joining him. Strucker was thinking deeply on his new allies he couldn't trust. Stearns, Garrett, Blonsky, the twins, Davida's team, even Malik. They would tear apart the alliance, whether due to their egos, greed, obsessions, or simply being too kind or moral for the work. Strucker couldn't trust any of them, so he would make himself allies of his own. Several minutes of walking brought him to his destination. He strode into the lower labs and walked into a room where a glowing series of rings held the scepter of Loki floating, suspended. Strucker stared at it for a moment. Then he looked at the glove on the table, a mechanical device created by List. It had been dubbed the Claw. An orange metal glove with a single port on the back, designed like the armor of a demonic knight. A glove made for Satan. Strucker put it on. The glove was designed to fight off any dangers the scepter could pose, but he still felt trepidation as he took the scepter in hand. With the weapon in hand, he turned and walked out of the lab. More walking brought him to the tent where Rana Phillips and Benjamin Tibbets were being held. He walked in and glared around the room. Out, all of you. The scientists began to walk out. Raina moved to follow, only for Strucker to shake his head. No, Raina, stay. He looked at the soldiers behind him. You out now. Sir, one of the soldiers began to say. He shut his mouth when he looked into Strucker's eyes. Rana and Raina shared a look. Strucker walked over to Rana's bedside and looked into her currently human eyes. How are you feeling? Rana, the woman who could become an aberration at a moment's notice, blinked at the uncharacteristic softness in her leader's voice. I'm fine. I feel amazing. Actually, no problems, Strucker asked. Not at all, sir, Rana smiled, putting a hand to her heart on the Hydra symbol on her white patient's uniform. I can fight, and I'm willing to do it. Strucker smiled back. Then he sighed. Rana, I will speak to you frankly. Any other day I would not. I would consider such a thing beneath me. But I've found myself realizing things, important things. First, please, transform into your other form. Rana looked at Rayna, who looked bewildered. After a moment, Rana nodded. In a shifting move, Rana gained height and weight. Smooth skin became scaled. Muscles and spikes sprouted across her. Rayna watched Rana's transformation with a vested interest. Strucker didn't look away from Rana. Beautiful. Strucker lifted the scepter in his hand. You know what this is, Rana? Rana stared at the glowing weapon with fear, swallowing Aileloki's scepter. Yes, it is powerful, capable of launching directed energy blasts, gifting others with powers. Rayna leaned in at that. It can even control minds, but that last power is not reliable. Useful, but I'd rather depend on someone's personal loyalty. He looked at Rana. You've been controlling it well, but I can see your anger. It's in all gamma-radiated individuals, that unending well of rage. Rana's eyes flashed. Whatever fear she had been portraying faded away. She had been faking, intriguing. Good, because I can use that anger, Strucker leaned forward. Renta, thank you for volunteering. In return, allow me to offer you a deal. Strucker continued to speak, and Rana listened. Rayna's eyes widened further and further as the conversation went on. When it was over, Strucker held out a hand. Rana took it without hesitation. I hear that it is traditional in some factions of Hydra. Strucker flickered his eyes over to Rayna, to give enhanced individuals a name, something powerful, to give an enhanced and inflated sense of ego, to make them more susceptible to control and manipulation. I do not subscribe to that. I want you to choose your codename, Rana. From now on, you are my right hand. Understand? Yes, sir, Rana said, her voice strong and steady. Her eyes flashed. And you promise? Win or lose, Rana, Strucker said softly. Win or lose. Strucker turned, walking towards Benjamin Tibbets, who was still asleep on his bed. The green-skinned young man kept growing and shrinking incredibly. Rana only had to wear oversized clothing. Benjamin, who grew portions of his body to become as large as the Hulk or Abominations, had been left with only a blanket to wear. Strucker watched him for a moment before he pressed the scepter's tip to Benjamin's chest. The specter's blue orb glowed for a moment as Strucker focused. Looking deep within the orb, one might have seen a yellow flash. Benjamin sighed, relaxing. His growing and shrinking flesh stopped until he was a skinny young man again. Strucker shook his head. He'll sleep, but this peace is temporary. He is a truly sick young man. With that, he turned. Rayna, come. I think you and I have things to discuss. January 16th. Sharon Carter, agent. In a small house in Washington, D.C., that had been recently bought for one of the most important women in the world, a meeting was in progress. Sweetie, when you became an agent, what did I tell you? An elderly but still healthy woman asked. Sharon smiled at the elderly woman in the bed in front of her, holding a hand at her bedside. You wanted me to take care of S.H.I.E.L.D. Did I? The elderly woman looked over at the tall black man standing at the foot of her bed. Trip, is that what I said? Yes, ma'am, Agent Triplet said with a wide grin. The elderly woman said. She shook her head. All that work and you young fools tear it apart in one fell swoop. In our defense, most of that was... Trip stopped talking, but it was too late. He winced at the pain that flashed in the older woman's eyes. I'm sorry, Aunt Peggy, Sharon apologized, feeling guilty about being unable to protect her aunt's life's work. What for? Peggy gave Sharon a very sharp smile. You weren't the one who allowed parasites into your legacy. Not your fault, Trip said, and in the end, the only reason S.H.I.E.L.D. could survive was because of the good work you did. S.H.I.E.L.D. survived because of you, not in spite of you, Aunt Peggy, Sharon said, squeezing the older woman's hand. Peggy sighed. Small comfort. You know, when I was young, I thought I'd faced all the horror the world could produce. Everything from the Dark Force to Howard Stark. And now poor Steve will have to face all of that. She looked between Sharon and Trip. You'll both help him. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. Trip and Sharon nodded. Peggy relaxed, smiling at the two. Good. Now, tell me, I've heard of the formation of Bridge, but I wish to know about the reactions of certain individuals during the discussion. The Russian president's aide, a woman with brown hair, how did she act? As the legacies of the Howling Commandos and Peggy Carter informed the elderly woman, a small box full of pills sat innocently on the nightstand next to Peggy's bed. When Sharon and Trip left Peggy's home, they entered Trip's car together. Trip started the car and stared out of the windshield without moving. After a moment, he turned it off. That woman was so strong, all of my life. The best damn spy in the world. I was always comparing every spy I knew to her, Trip said. Sharon smiled at that. I think I got a glimpse of that again. Just a bit, Sharon sighed happily, but she seemed happy even with all the bad news. The new director will be happy to hear about that, Trip said. I mean, Peggy's approval, you know? Sharon nodded. Yeah, and Simmons and Dial will be happy to know the pills work. Sharon gave Trip a grin. He put a hand on her shoulder, with Sharon grabbed. After a silent moment of happiness, they pulled away from each other. Trip started the car, and they started driving. They stopped at a light a few miles away. Suddenly, both of their comm units switched on, brief static filling their ears before a voice came on. This is X, you both need to run. The AI yelled urgently. X, Trip asked, uncomprehending. Hydra has sent Quinjets to your area. I'm sending a team to intercept, but... X's frantic voice was cut off when something landed in the intersection ahead of them with a boom of shattered concrete. Trip and Sharon stared as a tall being rose from the concrete. She was over 7 feet tall, with green-scaled skin, glowing yellow eyes, and taloned feet. She was wearing a workout top and military pants, and her eyes were firmly set on Trip and Sharon. Shit! Trip slammed on the accelerator, turning right and booking it down the street. The strange woman started chasing them with incredible speed. Who the hell is this? She isn't on any records, X said. She must be a new creation. Help is 6 minutes out. Then we last that long, Sharon said, opening the glove box and grabbing the submachine gun inside. She opened the window and leaned out, the wind rushing past her with the smell of French fries from a nearby fast food place drifting in the air. She sighted on the woman currently catching up with them on foot and started shooting in controlled bursts, pulling the trigger before giving up and cursing harshly in annoyance, pulling back into the car. She's bulletproof, Sharon yelled. I'm miskillable bad guys. Trip yelled back, swerving around an SUV that the woman chasing them pushed aside, sending it spinning like a top into a tree. Hydra Quinjet is sighting on you, but they haven't fired, X informed them. I'm attempting to hack them, but they've modified the Quinjet to be as low-tech as possible somehow. They want us alive, Trip realized, a chill going down his spine. Wait, where did she go? Sharon began to say. The woman landed on the hood of the car, crumbling the steel beneath her and sending the vehicle spinning out of control. She quickly planted her feet into the pavement so her boots left long grooves as she slowed the car to a halt. Come on, Trip slammed down on the accelerator, trying to run her over. The woman, in response, tore off the hood, then reached in and pulled the car's engine out with one hand, tossing it carelessly aside. Trip and Sharon instantly leaped out of the car, running in different directions. The woman leaped towards Trip, slamming him into the pavement. He tried to fight, but the woman simply took out a syringe and stabbed it into his neck. As he passed out, she lifted him up and threw him at the Quinjet as it floated above with the back hatch open, where he landed in the arms of a waiting soldier. Sharon, in the meantime, was sprinting with all her speed towards a back alley nearby. Once there, she could get into a building, maybe slip past them in a maze of halls. The scaled green woman landed in front of Sharon with a crunch of breaking asphalt, Sharon spun to avoid her, but the woman grabbed Sharon and lifted her into the air. As Sharon choked on a scaled fist strong enough to bend steel, the woman pulled her close. "Don't worry," the woman said gently, stabbing her in the neck with another syringe. "Soon you'll no longer feel powerless ever again." Sharon was out moments later. The Hydra Quinjet flew into the air and headed into the countryside. Ix tried to track it, Jarvis helping, and soon found its destroyed remains in the side of a barn. Sharon Carter and Antoine Triplet were MIA. Jennifer Walters, attorney at law. Across the country in Los Angeles, California, a woman was speaking to a jury as the rest of the courtroom watching. She was a short woman, with brown hair, a cute button nose, and a voice with a high pitch. Yet, when she spoke, it was with a confidence that drew the room in. She strode on sensible heels, wearing a white blouse with a black business skirt and jacket, her hair pulled into a high ponytail, and a pair of glasses that were thick enough to give her a slightly bug-eyed appearance. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, looking into the eyes of each member of the jury in question, "we've discussed the events of September 13th for a full week. I know you're all tired. You probably want to go home, but we can't leave." She shook her head, and several of the jurors actually did so as well. "Not until we know for certain that justice has had its day." My client, Beatrice Trask, the woman at the plaintiff's table, a pretty blonde with sad eyes and a cast on her left arm, stood a little straighter, was beaten in her home by the one person who was supposed to protect her. She eyed the defendant, a large overweight man with black hair perfectly groomed and eyes that were hard as they glared at the woman currently speaking. "Nicholas Trisk, a man who has been accused of domestic abuse before, a man who, according to witness testimony, often used violence to intimidate and control others." When Beatrice spoke, when she told us of how the person she loved became a monster, we all knew what had to be done. Nicholas Trask's fists clenched under the desk. "Please," she entreated, "show Beatrice and the other women who faced the same horrors inflicted by Nicholas Trask that justice does exist. Thank you." With that, Jennifer Walters took her seat with a quiet dignity. Later that day, as a screaming Nicholas Trask was placed in cuffs and dragged away, she allowed herself a smile. "Jennifer, I really wish you hadn't taken that case," an older man said later as he entered Jennifer Walters' office. Jennifer Walters looked up from her paperwork, noting the man who was walking forward. "Hi, Dad. How are you? Dreaming of a daughter who doesn't get herself into crap." Morris Walters was tall, well-built, if with a bit of beer belly under the sheriff's uniform he was wearing. His hair was the same color as his daughter's, cut short and brushed back. He sat down in the chair in front of his daughter's desk with a groan. "Sweetie, you know Trasak. His guys are going to retaliate somehow." "His guys," Jennifer said, "know full well that Trask isn't worth protecting anymore. He's burned too many bridges, Dad. Besides, did you see how much evidence was piled up? I get killed, he's the first on the suspect list." "But you'll still be dead," Morris said firmly. "Look, just let me set up some deputies to protect you, at least until things cool off a bit." Jennifer sighed, pretending to be annoyed rather than grateful. Damn it, she was supposed to be the hard-boiled lawyer, but at heart she was always happy to see that her father loved her, the product of being a single child of a single parent. "Fine, dinner tomorrow." Morris smiled. He got up and walked around the deck, kissing his daughter on her head as she gave him a mock glare, though she was clearly pleased. "I never miss it, do I?" "Not so far," Jennifer sighed. "Anyways, I have some more paperwork to do right now. I'm guessing you already have the deputies outside?" Morris barked to laugh. "Of course. I wasn't going to wait for you to say yes." Jennifer smiled at her father and looked at the photo on her desk. As she looked at it, her smile faded. Morris noticed and looked at the photo as well. On the picture were 4 people, 2 older women, desperately holding on to laughing children as all of them smiled at the camera. A young girl, Jennifer, wearing a pink dress with a dinosaur toy in her hand, and a young boy laughing as he held Jennifer's hand. "I miss him," Jennifer admitted. "I miss them." Her father said nothing. He simply put a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Late that night, Jennifer Walters entered her house carrying a box filled with files. She locked the door behind her and removed her shoes, sighing in relief as she clenched her toes against the carpet for a moment, feeling her sore feet slowly relax from a long day of standing in trial. She put the box of files on her kitchen table and walked over to the sink to grab some water, drinking it with relish. She contemplated going to sleep, but decided to make some coffee instead and quickly set up her machine. "I hope I'm not interrupting," a voice she'd never heard before spoke up behind her. "Jesus!" Jennifer spun around in shock and gaped at the man sitting at her counter. He was odd, to say the least. His skin was green, and his head was massive. He eyed her with fascination, as though she had some secret she had to give him. "Not him, I'm afraid, though I'm sure my contributions to society will be seen in the same light in the not-so-distant future," he said with a smug smile. "I am Samuel Stearns, a friend of your cousin." Jennifer stared at him, her thoughts feeling cloudy. "You're an Avenger?" "Huh?" Stearns shook his head. "No, only a friend, as I said. I simply wish to greet you, Miss Walters." Still feeling off-kilter, she took a step forward, almost losing her balance. What do you want?" "To bring you to your full potential," Stearns said with a smile. "I have some concentrations of Bruce's blood from an earlier experiment. I believe you'll be most helpful in making them of use to me and advancing my studies more than anyone else." Jennifer stumbled, landing on the floor as her eyes drifted aimlessly. "What?" "I put a narcotic in your water, Stearns," Idley informed her. "It won't last long, and there are no harmful side effects, but it will serve its purpose. Don't worry, my dear. Soon I'll give you a gift beyond imagining. Though I admit it's mostly a gift for Bruce," Stearns chuckled. "He'll be so happy when he sees what you've become." That was the last thing Jennifer heard before her world became darkness. January 18th. Star Ghost. At the same time, in a warehouse next to a harbor, an attack had gone very, very wrong. A group of Hydra soldiers wearing black tactical gear were roaming around the dark confines of the warehouse, spinning around as they kept their guns aimed and ready. Centipede soldiers stood among them, their eyes glowing red as they strode through the room. "Where the hell is she now?" one of the soldiers yelled. "I don't know, damn it," another replied, his eyes wide with fear. The men and women in the group spun to see a hand inside his chest, right where his heart lay. The woman who had her hand in his chest was wearing an all-white outfit armored over her chest and with a hood that went over her head. The helmet beneath her hood was all white, with 5 eerie red lights that stared at them. She stood for a moment, watching the Hydra soldiers around her. Then she squeezed her hand, and an oddly vicious, wet-sounding snap came from the man. "Open fire!" one of the soldiers yelled, and they started shooting. The woman seemed to fade briefly from existence, allowing the man she had killed to fall to the ground riddled with bullets. Any shots that actually hit her flew through her phantom-like form before she disappeared. When she appeared again, she kicked a Hydra agent with polka-dot skin in the neck, collapsing his trachea. She disappeared again as assault rifle fire aimed at her and reappeared next to a centipede soldier who she punched in the face. The soldier took the blow without flinching, then grabbed her by the shoulders and lifted her up. He began to throw her at the ground, but she suddenly became intangible, moving through his form and flipping backward before pressing a hand in his head, squeezing his brain moments later, then going invisible again. She flipped behind cover, using the enemy's confusion to take a moment to breathe. "Any chance on that backup? Those centipede guys are hard to kill." "On its way, Miss Starr," Jarvis said. They were in the midst of saving people from an apartment fire, so they were a bit held up. Ava Starr, codenamed Ghost, nodded, then got up and stepped away from her cover. With a running start, she phased through her cover, moved at high speed in between the quantum and real world, then kicked a centipede soldier in the chest. Her kick, augmented by her phasing, sent the centipede soldier flying. Ghost flipped in the air and went intangible to let bullets fly past her, spinning to kick a Hydra agent in the face, then phasing through a centipede soldier attempting to grab her before grabbing the back of his clothes and twisting so that a Hydra agent shooting at her hit the centipede soldier instead. Going invisible again, she dived into cover. One of the Hydra soldiers cursed. Damn it, we're supposed to capture her? Just kill her already, another one yelled. Strucker can study her body. We've been trying, KK. Ava blinked at the sound of the Hydra soldier getting interrupted. Last time she'd heard that it was because of her, but if she wasn't the reason, leaning out of cover, she checked out the situation. An arrow had slammed into Hydra soldier's heart, an arrow that was blinking. Boom. Ava dropped back into cover as the arrow exploded. More arrows fell into the din, forcing the soldiers to scatter. Over 40 men had been sent, of which Ava had killed 10 since they'd started chasing her. Now, thanks to the mysterious archer, only 20 or so remained. Aid has arrived, Jarvis said over Ava's comm unit. Prepare for transportation. Wait, who? A blue blur came to a stop next to Ava. She looked up at the being that had come into existence. Hi, I'm Dial, the being said, in the form Ava would later learn was called Fast Track. Wanna get out of here? Look out, Ava yelled when a centipede soldier came from the smoke to grab at Fast Track. There was a blur. Then the centipede soldier was flying back from Fast Track, who had taken a boxing stance. He smirked, waving his fists, which were dripping odd-colored blood. Yeah, got to hit these guys a lot to cause any damage. He turned back to Ava. Come on. Ava nodded, rising to her feet, only to blink when the alien swept her bridal style into his arms. There was a blur of motion as the room moved around them, arrows falling from the sky to kill Hydra and centipede soldiers. Then they were outside in front of a waiting Quinjet. Ava, panicking, went intangible and dropped to the floor. What just happened? She asked, rolling to stare at Fast Track. He blinked. Did you just... Ava! She turned to see the Quinjet, open in the back. Inside was Bill Foster, her adoptive father, an older black man who was a bit overweight. He waved towards her, yelling as the Quinjet started up. Come on, let's go. Eva, still confused, ran into the Quinjet, Bill hugging her tightly before guiding her into a seat. Fast Track looked at Bill Foster for a moment. Morpheus, that's cool. With that, Dial ran into the warehouse as the Quinjet took off into the sky. Wolfgang von Strucker, January 19th. An entire goddamn platoon. Strucker slammed his fist onto his desk, rage in his eyes. 15 centipede soldiers, 25 of our best, all dead or captured, and we didn't even get our objective. Calm down, Wolfie, Garrett said casually, pouring a glass of scotch. Malik and List were in the room as well, watching as Strucker cursed in anger. We still got the others. The others are just future experiments, Strucker said, spinning the scepter in his clawed hand. Ava Star was a fully fledged, enhanced. Her abilities make her one of the best assassins and thieves in the world. With more like her, there could have been nothing we could not accomplish. Strucker's scepter glowed with his agitation. Hey, we can still make more super soldiers and gamma-enhanced, Garrett said, sipping his drink. It is not enough to simply have brute strength, Malik said. Ava was among the best assassins in S.H.I.E.L.D. for a reason. Only Romanov has a better record. And well, she is. All the men in the room thought about Black Widow for a moment, then looked around the room, focusing on the shadows. After knowing for certain they were alone, Strucker spoke. The fact our men were also captured is worse. They were all equipped with cyanide tablets in their cheekbones, but we can't take any risks. We need to leave, he said, in a voice that tolerated no argument. Damn, really? Garrett asked, sounding honestly disappointed. I was getting used to the place. It's our only move right now. S.H.I.E.L.D. will track us down. If their captives don't tell them where we are, then whatever damned AI that's helping them will, Stearns is failing to keep it at bay. We head to the secondary location now. Strucker glared at him. Oh, well, I guess I'll go get my stuff then. Garrett turned and left, uncaring of any other issues that might be brought up. Melik, on the other hand, sat still in his chair. List looked at the older man, then at Strucker. Strucker nodded for List to leave, and the scientist rose from his seat, leaving Strucker and Malik alone. Malik spoke as soon as List had left. Stearns tells me you refused to go forward with my proposed project. Yes, I did. You are asking me to believe in a fairy tale, a religious leader for us to follow. It's not practical. Can you say that, in a world where Thor and Loki battled in New York City? Malik asked. Thor and Loki are real, tangible people, Strucker answered. I have never seen or heard of your god before this, and I've worked hard to make sure of that, Malik said, but he is a power who could make the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. fear us. I'm not going to stop the project if you wish to go ahead with it, but it will be on your own time and resources, with Stearns helping you when he isn't working for me. The pieces of the monolith passed down by my family are in the vault in Germany. They are at your disposal, Malik. But know this, you won't be bringing some destined leader to rule over us all. Hydra has outgrown the idea. Whatever you bring from that portal of yours, it can only be an asset or an enemy, Strucker stated. Malik rose from his chair, his eyes hard. You dare to attack him, and I swear the pain that I will bring upon you will— You are not, Strucker's voice, still and hard as stone, brought Malik to a stop. The scepter in Strucker's clawed hand glowed ominously. The leader of Hydra, and no one fears you anymore. I show you respect because you are due it. I allow you this project because I know what it means to you, and I will not spend resources stopping you. But I will not allow us to follow a false god due to your obsessions. It isn't practical. Strucker growled out the last word. Strucker, what do you know about the Inhumans? Strucker eyed Malik, who took that as his cue to continue. It's the name that they gave themselves thousands of years ago. You know as well as I do that when the Confederacy starts to ask questions, they'll want more than cookie-cutter soldiers. You want your superhuman army, but you'll need something special as well. I can give it to you, but you need to understand, Strucker. Bringing our leader back could save us. Several moments passed before Strucker visibly calmed and spoke once more. Tell me about these Inhumans. Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch. When Hydra kidnapped their targets, they knew there were risks, but there were 2 escape risks unaccounted for, who were speaking in their room. We leave tomorrow, Wanda said to Pietro. After everything they've done, kidnapping those people, we need to escape. Can we take them with us, do you think? Pietro asked. Maybe, Wanda said, frowning. But they're under heavy guard. That woman, Rona. She's watching them, and if we get caught— Pietro shuddered, and Wanda felt herself doing the same. Since getting her powers, she hadn't found herself fearing much. But now, Emil Blonsky was bad enough. Combined with Rana the centipede soldiers, Deathlock, Wanda felt fear. Together she was sure she and her brother could defeat them, at least escape if nothing else. But with the prisoners. But they needed to leave, maybe go back to Sokovia. For some reason the idea no longer appealed to her. She felt she needed to do something, make amends somehow. There was a knock at the door. Sharing a look, Pietro sped over to the door in a blur and opened it before rushing back to Wanda as though he had never moved at all. Helen and Deathlock walked into the room. Helen brushed her hair behind her head, smiling at the pair. Deathlock simply stared at them. Hey, Helen said, sounding friendly. We have orders. Orders? Wanda asked, confused. What are we doing? Leaving, darling, Helen said kindly. Well, the others are. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers will be on their way soon. Some of us will stay as a skeleton crew, lead them somewhere else to fight. I'm sorry? Pietro asked, his accent becoming a touch stronger. We're just going to be a distraction. Not exactly, Deathlock responded. Strucker and Stearns have a plan, and Blonsky can't wait. Pietro and Wanda shared a look at that. Everyone knew what Blonsky wanted. It was, after all, what the Maximoffs wanted as well, or it was. Okay, Helen said, looking over at Deathlock. Sucker, you mind if I talk to the twins alone for a sec? Deathlock nodded, turning and walking out. When the cyborg left, Helen waited for the door to close. Then she tapped her belt, and brief noise of static came from it, followed by her turning to glare at the pair. Seriously, if you're going to talk about leaving, make sure you ain't bugged, Helen said. Or at least invest in a jammer. Pietro uncrossed his arms, gaping. Please, Sugar, Stearns, and Strucker have been bugging and unbugging this castle since we got here. Helen shook her head. Now listen closely. Because my girls and I have been talking about the crap Podra has been pulling, and I think we can help each other out. January 20th. Rana Williams' aberration. Within the castle in the early morning, Rana stood at Strucker's right side, watching as soldiers and scientists lifted large boxes, put away equipment, and packed up chemicals and serums. Stearns was standing with them, the big-headed scientist scowling as everything was moved. "This is not conducive to my research," Stearns said, his eyes hard on Strucker. "If you approved my experiment earlier, we could have a force capable of fighting the Avengers off." "Not without control over them," Strucker pointed out. "As it is, we are being forced to leave America entirely." Stearns scowled. "If you'd allowed me more time—" "The AI has begun to track us," Strucker said firmly, "and your intelligence has proven insufficient. We can no longer even divert them." Stearns scowled at the insult to his genius. "SHIELD has taken down 3 bases in their rage, and the Hulk is helping. They are coming here." Rana and Stearns glanced at Strucker, Stearns with interest and a small smile on his face. Rana, on the other hand, thought about that. The Hulk. She had only been changed a couple of days ago, and she'd felt magnificent. Her strength, her durability, speed, even her healing. She felt unstoppable, but there were 2 beings she wanted to challenge now. She'd never been competitive, but now, even in her human form, she felt aberration lurking in the back of her mind. A monster wishing to challenge other monsters, and the Hulk, no matter what Abomination said, was the pinnacle of monsters. Though a new challenger to that throne had appeared, Dial. Stearns sighed dramatically. "Very well. Thank you." Strucker turned and walked out of the room, Rana following diligently. Once they were far enough away, she spoke. "Sir, I remember my promise to you, Rana," Strucker said softly. He was only ever soft with her. Rana appreciated that. Not in the way of a woman blushing towards a gentle demeanor. Strucker was soft, but only to let her understand how serious he was. "In the meantime, I need to speak with someone. Blonsky will be waiting for you." Rana nodded. They walked until reaching the Chitauri soldiers. Strucker always had some distance from him. Then she turned and walked away. It was easy to find the monster who everyone knew as Abomination. He was given a barn to live in, but the monster was often restless. It had been a problem, in fact. Emil Blonsky was not a monster given to relaxation. He needed a battle. He needed a challenge. So did Rana, which meant when he challenged her, she immediately accepted. It's why she walking towards the barn Abomination called home. The barn stood in the middle of a field, with a forest a short distance away and a peaceful river running nearby. She took a breath of the fresh air, only to wince slightly. Since getting her powers, her senses had been heightened, and the scent of fresh air was tinged with that of faces, blood, and more. There was the scent of vegetation and water as well, but she still had to get used to it. She strode up to the large wooden structure and wasn't surprised to see the giant monster standing there, his arms crossed and a wide grin on his face. What did surprise her was the sight of Deathlock standing there as well. The cyborg was a mystery to her. According to Garrett, Deathlock was his most trusted soldier, at least since he'd sacrificed Grant Ward to escape S.H.I.E.L.D. But she never knew what to think of the man. His face was scarred on its left side by a large burn, but she got a sense that the pain in his eyes didn't come from that. It wasn't helped by how formidable he was. While not the strongest in Hydra's current group, he was a strong contender for the title. Deathlock was looking up at Abomination, who was speaking to him with a condescending tone as Deathlock listened calmly. As Rana strode up them, she began to shapeshift. Her smooth skin became scaled, her boots stretched around her now clawed feet. Her eyes began to glow, and she felt her power increase massively. The feel of it, of suddenly gaining so much strength, that freeing sense of rage begging to lash out without worry of the consequences, made her sigh a little in ecstasy. "All the power in the world," Abomination mocked. "And you worry about things that don't even matter." Deathlock's fists tightened, and his eyes hardened. His forearms opened, and the rockets within sprouted. He looked up at the giant Abomination, standing firmly and eyeing him angrily. Abomination smiled down at him in turn. Rana came up then, and both monsters turned to look at her. She eyed them both calmly, eyeing them. Damn, Abomination chuckled. Why do you look so much better than me? Shut up, Blonsky, Rana said simply. Deathlock, we have a problem. None at all, Deathlock turned around. Just checking on things. Goodbye. Deathlock leaped into the air and shot upwards. Ports opened on his back, and Chattatori energy sent him flying through the air. Ha! Didn't know he'd learned how to fly, the giant chuckled. What a fun world I've woken up to. Abomination looked at Rana, his eyes panned up and down her form. For all the height and muscle mass she had gained, he was still larger. They told me you picked the name Aberration. Yeah, I did, Rana said, looking up at her male counterpart. I like it. Abomination cracked his neck. Well, we're going to be fighting later today, and I want a good warm-up. We're allowed to destroy this place, so we can really have some fun. How about it, bitch? He had to have said that on purpose, just to anger her. But that was the thing about those with gamma-irradiated blood. Anger came damn easy. Rana stepped forward and kicked into Abomination's giant chest. He went flying back into the barn, destroying the doors with ease. I'm going to beat you to death, Rana roared, leaping after him and landing on his chest. Roaring with rage, she punched him in the face, her scaled knuckles smashing against his chin. Ha ha, Abomination laughed quietly. She chose to respond to punch him again, sending one of his teeth flying. He grabbed her by the neck, lifting her up, and Rana kicked him in the throat. Enough, he threw her to the side, getting up and confronting her. Rana flipped in the air, landing against the wall of the barn and immediately jumping off of it. As the wall shattered under the strength of her jump, she flipped around and kicked Abomination in the face. He stepped back, then punched her in the face in return. She took the blow as the barn around them began to shake and fall apart, punching Abomination in the stomach. He grabbed her arm and spun around once before throwing her upwards. She went flying through the ceiling of the barn and snarled with rage as she flew straight up, orientating herself to face Abomination as he rocketed towards her. He rose over her and brought his fists down on her back with a Captain Kirk axe handle, launching her back towards the barn where she slammed into the dirt. She took a breath, then rolled over, dodging Abomination's landing. They eyed each other for a moment. Is that the best you've got? Rana said, trying to get him to attack. Instead, Abomination blinked, surprised. Then he laughed, a deep growling laugh. The barn began to fall apart around them as he continued to laugh. Okay, Aberration, let's go. The two scaled monsters leaped towards each other, ignoring the barn falling on their heads, and began to beat each other, forgoing tactics trained into both military soldiers for the sheer joy of brawling. They tore through chunks of the barn, turning it into sawdust against their invincible forms. Shockwaves were sent out with every punch and kick. Anyone nearby would have assumed an earthquake had begun. They fought for about 10 minutes and turned the entire area around them into a crater before finally stopping. When it was over, they turned the entire place into dust, shattered wood, and massive craters. A good warm-up when the Avengers would be visiting soon. Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch. In another section of the castle grounds, Wanda and Pietro met with Helen. She walked them over to the river that ran through the land, then along the shores for a while. Eventually, they reached a large oak tree standing majestically over the river. Two people sat underneath its shade, as different in appearance as night and day. When they walked up, Helen introduced them. This is Marion Pouncey, aka Poundcakes, Helen said with a smile. Don't let her size fool you, Suga. She's a sweetheart. Wanda was glad she'd said that, because Marion was the biggest woman she'd seen that wasn't Rana Williams in her aberration form. She had neck-length black hair that fell over the right side of her face, an upturned nose, and a shy smile. She also had muscles on top of muscles, all easy to see in the tight blue t-shirt she wore, while still being extremely buxom. And this is Mimi Gold, we call her Songbird. Helen pointed at the pixie-like blonde woman sitting next to Marion, dwarfed by the massive figure beside her. Wanda, in fact, felt massive compared to her. She was that small. Despite that, Mimi was also as physically fit as Helen and Marion were, something Wanda was curious about. She had blonde hair cut to the scalp and grinned confidently up at Wanda and Pietro. The tiny blonde rose up along with Marion, and the two strode forward to greet her brother and her. "How's it going?" Mimi said. She had a beautiful voice, one that seemed to fill the air a while after she'd spoken. "Hello," Marion said softly. She brushed her hair out of her eyes and looked at Helen, who nodded gently before tapping her belt. That soft buzzing came again. "Okay, Sugar, we can't be heard, at least, according to Bridge," Helen said. "Bridge?" Wanda asked, still trying to understand what exactly was going on. All Helen had told them was that she had a way out of Hydra. "It's S.H.I.E.L.D.'s new name," Helen said. "How do you know that?" Pietro asked. "Haven't we had trouble getting news on them?" "I've got my sources," Helen smiled secretively. "Why are we here, Helen?" Pietro said, losing his patience. The three women in front of them slowly stopped smiling. Helen shared a glance with her friends, then turned to look back at Wanda and Pietro. "I told you that I stayed with Hydra after Davida was captured to get her back. And that was the plan, to find her, help her escape. And you guys wanted to kill the Avengers, Tony Stark in particular. How about this? You tell us your story, we tell you ours." Wanda began to open her mouth. Then she stopped. An old pain filled her heart. She looked at Pietro. Her brother was staring at the ground. He licked his lips, a nervous action, and clenched his fists. The three women don't say anything, simply waiting. Wanda was about to speak when Pietro stepped forward and put a hand on her shoulder, nodding when she looked at him. "When we were 10 years old, we were having dinner, the four of us. When the bombing began that day, our home was hit. The first shell landed 2 floors below us, makes a hole in our floor, our parents go in. Our home falls down around us. Pietro swipes at his nose, his breath harsh. I grab her, roll under the bed, and another shell comes in, lands 3 feet from us. But it just sat there. It didn't blow up. It just stayed there. On the side was a word, Stark, Wanda said quietly. We were under that bed for 2 days as they tried to dig us out." Staring at his name, Pietro shook his head. "While they tried to dig us out, all I could think with every shift of brick," Wanda said softly, "was that this will set it off. For 2 days we stared at Tony Stark's weapon, waiting for it to kill us. But now we are working for people who are worse," Pietro said, cursing out the words. "I spent years hating him. Hating America, hating the Avengers when he made them, and now I can't even find the energy anymore." Wanda looked at him, surprised by his admission. He looked away, ashamed. "I'm sorry," Mimi said, the petite young woman giving Wanda a pitying look. Wanda brushed it off. "Well, that is why we joined Hydra. Strucker told us he would give us the power to kill Tony Stark, and he did, but we cannot be a part of this anymore." Helen took a deep breath. "Well, our reason is a little different. We just wanted Davida back. She's been our friend since high school." "Our sister," Marion said, the giant woman crossing her massive arms. "We wrestled together," Helen said, "until the car crash. We ended up in a coma for years. When we woke up, our doctor gave us powers. So we used them to do some simple bruiser work, made some small cash that way. Then Strucker offered us enough cash to set us up for life. Davida gets arrested on her first job, and Strucker asks us to work with him for the chance to help her escape. But then they started mutating people, kidnapping and brainwashing," Mimi scowled. "We want nothing to do with them. And the second we got a better offer." "A better offer?" Wanda asked, furrowing her brow. "From who?" The three women didn't respond, Helen giving Mimi a glare for her misstep. "What are we here for?" Pietro stepped forward, his eyes hard. "So you can escape," Helen said, moving to stare into his eyes. Speedster and Wrestler eyed each other. "You have a chance to join in on our deal. But first, we need to tell you something about Strucker, about Hydra and their role in Sokovia. Because after all this time being pissed at the blacksmith for making a sword, you've worked with the knight who wielded it." Wanda had a sinking feeling that everything she had ever known was going to fall apart. Days before, January 5th, Mahmoud Shaheda. I was standing in front of the massive skyscraper that Daniel Whitehall had been using as his base of operations, watching as bridge agents took away Hydra guys away through the glass doors in front. More were being carted away by members of the US military. Still hard to get used to all this, I said softly. Tell me about it, Creel said, standing next to me as we watched everything going on. I looked around. We hadn't brought in everyone, but enough Avengers, new and old, had come along to make it a bit crowded. Bruce was sitting in a van nearby, looking relieved that he hadn't had to change into his alter ego. Apparently, that was called a code green situation. Natasha was sitting with him, listening as he typed at his laptop and spoke with her at a rapid pace. Tony hadn't come, but Brody was floating over us with his arms raised and pointing at the Hydra soldiers and personnel that were being escorted out. He hadn't had to do much, just blow up the helicopters on the roof before they could be mobilized, and the war machine was now on sentry duty. Steve and Sam were speaking to the press. Officially, Steve and Sam were now the team leaders, so it was up to them to talk to the media. Sam seemed nervous, but he was doing his best. As Creel and I stood side by side watching everything, two new members of the team walked up to us. Bobby Morse and Isabel Hartley, two of the 4 women on Bridges' list of female assassin badasses without powers, along with Natasha and Melinda May. Bobby smiled as she stood next to me, carefully avoiding coming close to Creel. "We did good work," Bobby said, the tall buxom blonde crossing her arms. "I don't think anyone ever really got hurt on our side." "Plenty of theirs, though." Hartley, still looking like an older and stronger Xena to me, if with more concealing clothes, looked on as body bags with Hydra soldiers inside were wheeled out. Her resemblance to the warrior princess only increased with the savage smile on her face. "Me, I was just glad I hadn't had to kill. The Omnitrix had changed me back on the way through a lab, but a healthy amount of ices had kept the bad guys down. Thank God for Fitzsimmons and the magic tranquilizing bullets they'd invented." "How you feeling?" I asked Creel, taking down Daniel Whitehall. "Damn good." Creel crossed his massive arms, smiling. "I kinda wish I could kill him myself, though, instead of capturing him." "Oh, so do I, big guy." Hartley patted him on the shoulder. For some reason, the two of them being friendly seemed weird to me, but they'd hit it off quickly. "Oh, Isabel," I said, remembering, "your sister is coming by tomorrow. I'll have her fixed up by then." Isabel stared at me for a moment before smiling brilliantly. "Thanks." "Of course." I looked up at the building. "Man, can you believe how nice the place was? Seriously, evil assholes have the best decorators." Bobby scoffed. "Yeah, if you like torture chambers." Depends on the company," Isabel joked. "I'm thinking about buying it," I admitted. When the 3 looked at me, I smirked. "I stole Hydra's money, remember? I mean, I donated half of it to charities and good causes, but I still have some cash to burn." "That rich, huh? I ever tell you how attractive you are?" Isabel said, grinning. I laughed, but kept looking up. "Seriously, what do you guys think? We could use a big base like this, and I bet it'd sell cheap." "Might want to ask the director." Bobby nodded towards someone behind us, and we turned to see the director of Bridge. She was wearing the same outfit she usually preferred, a blue jumpsuit, though she had her hair down, and the new Bridge logo rested on the left breast of her outfit. Maria Hill had joined Steve and Sam, and the 3 were answering questions together. Sam still nervous, but Maria and Steve apparently calm. "She's a good choice," Bobby noted. "Well, she is better looking than Fury," I quipped. "But yeah, I'll ask her if she thinks it's a good idea." "Kid," Hawkeye called out, removing the last of the suit he'd worn over his costume to masquerade as that Bakshi guy. "Come on, we're flying back home." "Right?" The 4 of us walked towards him, and I tapped the Omnitrix. Instead of changing into an alien, my Quinjet flew down towards us. Our first mission as Bridge against Hydra was a win. Now the war was going to begin in earnest. My Quinjet had been heavily modified. I'd spent a few hours as jury rig working on the internals of it, the engines, the tech, even turning the rotors into repulsor engines like on the Insight helicarriers. I'd also added the Omnitrix logo on the side because brand recognition was important. Then I'd upgraded it, pun totally intended, giving it the black sheen with green circuitry I gave all my creations once Upgrade did his work. My Quinjet could fly in space or under the ocean for a limited amount of time, allowing me to go to the moon for at least a couple of days if need be. It had anti-gravity, force fields, laser guns, repulsor beams, AI functionality so I could bring X along with me wherever I fought, extra arc reactors in case the power source I'd created broke down, the quantum communications all of us Avengers had, and security so it could only be activated with an Omnitrix user or Avengers authorization. I also included stealth tech, optical cloaking, thermal heat sinks, and sonic mufflers to make it quiet. I hadn't been able to do everything I wanted with it, since there are limits to how much you can stuff in such a small space, but it was good practice for later. It even had a fridge in the back for snacks. It was sweet as hell. And Hawkeye and Bobby were backseat flying. "Let up on the throttle," Clint said, as I flew us back. "You need to take some time to really learn how to fly her. You won't always be flying from point A to point B, so we should practice your maneuvers for combat." "Well, don't go that slowly," Bobby said, the blonde leaning over my seat. "You'll need to move pretty quick to dodge attacks." "Dodge?" I asked, guiding the Quinjet in between two buildings. "You realize the only weapons that can take down my baby exist in space, right?" "Don't get cocky," Hawkeye said, "and try going under the bridge over there." With an annoyed sigh, I dove towards the street, pulling about 20 feet over it and going under the bridge. "You two realize he's driving us home, right?" Sam asked from the back. "Just keep drinking your beer," Clint said easily. Sam sipped at it, having gotten the drink from Creel, apparently. I grunted at that and turned the handle so I went towards a nearby river. I guided the ship to go underwater and turned on the lights. Some fishes swam away as we passed. With another turn, I lifted into the air, then hit the throttle. Soon we were at the very ends of speeds that could be considered Mach. "Look, you two clearly want to turn flying the Defiant, so—" "Oh, come on," Clint said, sounding very put out as I rose up. "We're not—" "No, I wanted to try," Bobby said hurriedly, rushing into the seat. "Bobby," Clint said, pretending to sound shocked, though the grin on his face made it clear he was in agreement. I walked into the back, where Sam and Rhodey were kicking back. Hartley, Creel, Bucky, Steve, Natasha, and Bruce were there as well. Bruce walking up as I joined Rhodey and Sam. "It was a good mission, right?" I asked. "I mean, less crazy than my first Avengers mission." "Less than mine too," Bruce admitted, smiling. "Hey, my first Avengers mission was yours," Sam said. "But I liked that one better. Less press." "Come on, fearless leader," Rhodey said with a grin. "The press loves you." "Yeah, right up until the next giant explosion." Sam leaned back in his chair. "But yeah, it felt good to fight Hydra." "I'm just wondering how they're circumnavigating X and Jarvis," Bruce said. "They've both been hunting Hydra, but Whitehall is the first big fish we've been able to find." "But Stearns," I said. Rhodey and Bruce looked at me, Sam sipping his beer. "You read the files we were given, right? He's the Hulk of brains, you know. I think he's been helping Hydra fight off Jarvis and X." Bruce frowned. "You really think he's helping Hydra? I mean, he was eccentric, really eccentric, but he never struck me as evil." "And Emil Blonsky was a war hero," Rhodey reminded Bruce. Bruce looked away at that, looking visibly ashamed. "Hey, it's not your fault, Bruce," I said. "For all we know, Stearns is under duress, and Blonsky was unstable before he got injected with your blood." Bruce turned and walked away. Saddened by Bruce's lack of a response, I turned to a nearby computer screen on the wall and tapped it, accessing the quantum comms. "Hey, Tony, we're on our way back." Tony showed up on the screen. "What, is Steve driving like an old man again? What's taking you guys so long?" "I'm not even talking to you," Steve protested from the back. "No, I was flying," I said, rolling my eyes. "You get it set up?" "Mostly," Tony said, becoming serious again. "Fitz and I have done most of it, but jury rig isn't so great with precision. Also, why does this thing keep randomly giving everyone that stays around it too long a random die job?" I winced. That should wear off in a day or so." "I hope so." Happy walked into view, glaring at me, and I choked back a laugh. He had bright blue hair now, which looked ridiculous, mostly because it glowed. "Is this radioactive?" he asked, concerned. "Happy we already tested it, you're fine," Tony said dismissively. "I have a date tonight." Happy complained. You have a date and didn't come to me about it? Tony said, acting as if the news was some great betrayal. I can probably make something, I began to say. No, Happy pointed at me. The next time I trust something you make, it'll be too soon. I still think Pepper shouldn't even use that armor you made her. I rolled my eyes. Anyways, I'll land the Quinjet at headquarters, and Bruce and I will work on the final designs before we start making them. This'll be fun, Tony said, grinning. Be good to update everyone's wardrobe. I looked down at my costume and nodded. As cool as it was, I needed an upgrade. Huh? No pun intended, this time. Days before, January 15th, it was only a couple minutes more before we got to the newly named Avengers Tower. Hovering over the tower was an Insight helicarrier, renamed Enterprise. And yes, I'd been the one to suggest the name. It made for quite a sight, a massive helicarrier floating over the city of New York. Even with its optical cloak on its bottom, people could still see the shimmer if they looked long enough. I brought the Defiant in towards the Enterprise. Nice and gentle, Clint said, calm as a cucumber. I brought my baby towards the flight deck, letting up on the throttle, lowering Defiant until she touched down. There was a shake as she settled. Then I turned her off, clicking some buttons real fast. Nice job. You learn quick. Yeah, well, my relationship with Defiant is closer than most, I said with a grin, rising out of my seat. That just sounds wrong, Clint groaned, laughing. Everyone began to get off, and when the doors opened, I saw that the other vehicles from the raid hadn't caught up just yet. Any issues with the transport of Whitehall and his people? No, sir, everyone will be arriving on schedule, barring the soldiers and personnel marked to be given to the U.S. military. Thanks, Axe, I said warmly. How went your movie watching, buddy? You were correct, Shopping Mall was hilarious and very goofy. There was no logic to the film, but I still enjoyed it. X confessed, I will be playing the video games you mentioned once I am finished with the movies. Kinda jealous of how quick you are, I said with a grin. We all have our advantages in life, X said, and I could almost hear the grin in his voice. At some point, X had developed a sense of humor. Tony was so damn proud when he found out. We went through the Enterprise's main door, which slid up as we walked with a classic hiss, and all of us walked together to the research lab at the bottom of the ship. It took a lot of engineers to turn that glass bubble on the bottom into a metal one, with a few windows left, but most importantly, several floors of research and development. Important for the future missions it would be undertaking. Everyone split up to go various directions throughout the helicarrier, leaving me and Bruce on our own to go visit Tony. We entered the labs, where Fitzsimmons were working with Skye. I couldn't see Tony, but I could see the machine I'd created with the group resting in the center of the room. It was a large rectangular machine as tall as Fitz was, and as long as a diamond head would have been lying down. The center of it was clear, and Fitz was messing with one of the side panels. Simmons was typing at a tablet as she roamed around the room, while Skye was at a computer. When we walked in, the three looked up at us, and all smiled beautifully. Seriously, why is everyone in this universe so photogenic except me? How'd the mission go? Skye asked as Bruce and I walked in. Bad guys arrested or dead, I said, walking over to her to look at her screen. Well, that's good, Simmons said, blinking at my bluntness. Dr. Banner, did you have to? No, Bruce rubbed his hands nervously. I didn't have to. Where's Tony? Right here, Tony said from somewhere in the room. I looked around briefly, confused. Skye tapped my shoulder with a cough and pointed at the machine. When I looked at it uncomprehending for a second, she pointed at the bottom of the machine, where a pair of legs were poking out from under it, wearing blue jeans and sneakers. I looked at Skye, who grinned. Okay, how's the programming going, Skye? Considering I'm dealing with alien tech, she asked. Pretty good, I think. I'm still trying to figure out why it keeps changing everyone's hair color. Oh, yes, Simmons suddenly spun to look at me, her eyes bright. How does that work? Somehow it's been literally changing people's DNA to give them hairstyles that simply aren't possible for humans, and I've been trying to discover the process by which it does it. Hell if I know, I admitted. I'm only smart as the alien I turn into. You want to ask me about video games and movies. I'm in. You want to learn how to do a squat. Hell yes, but I know nothing about how or why this stuff works. Sky scoffed, pushing me away from her computer playfully. Why are you even asking about the programming then? Because I'm a curious guy, I answered, letting her push me away. Fitz, we good? Fitz looked up at me, confused, before nodding. Oh, yes, I've been going over everything with Mr. Stark, and it should be working perfectly. As long as Sky can program them correctly, the Catoms will be able to interact perfectly with each other. Well, Tony pulled himself out from under the machine. Okay, kid, here's what we got. The billionaire walked around the machine. Claytronics, making tiny nanomachines that can change shape and meld to turn into different objects with different functions. I was playing around with the concept for a while, Tony waved at the machine, but with all of us, I think we can go next level with it. Jarvis, Sky and I have been working at the programming, and Fitz and I having been working with Jerry Rig to make this thing work. We hit a snag though, trying to discover a power source that would be able to get mass-produced. I can't just hand every guy I know an arc reactor. So what did you do? I asked. I used the quantum comms for inspiration, Tony grinned. Seriously, kid, that red gremlin of yours is magic. Well, not magic, Fitz replied, striding over to me as he opened a panel and pointed inside of it. I leaned in to see 2 arc reactors hooked up to a center device, but using quantum entanglement, we've developed a way for the Catoms to store a massive amount of energy without any energy lost or wasted during charge or discharge. Fitz grinned. It's really been a huge breakthrough. We might have solved so many issues with power. I mean, the sky's the limit from here. Calm down, Ross, Tony said, sounding amused. What about the items themselves? Bruce asked. Did you figure out how to make all the bells and whistles work in them? Oh yes, 100%, Simmons said, walking towards us. We just need a blueprint, and the Claytronics object creator will do its work. Well, as long as it stops changing everyone's hair color, Fitz? Simmons said, holding back giggle. I looked over at him only to have to hold back a laugh. Tony grinned, and Bruce hid his own smile as Sky laughed. Fitz looked around at us before his face fell. Oh, come on. He rushed over to a window and stared at his reflection. His usual brown locks had turned into a magnificent red that shifted into blue at the roots, the colors flickering so that it looked like his hair was on fire. How? Fascinating, Simmons and Bruce said in unison. I sighed, tapping the Omnitrix. Upgrade. I'll see what I can do to make it work, I said, merging the Claytronics object creator. Jerry Rig really loved playing games, man. It was about noon or so when we'd taken down Whitehall, and when the work on the Claytronics object creator was finished. It was around 7 p.m. Jarvis and X would work on the programming while the rest of us went to get something to eat. I went to the cafeteria and got a tray of food, eating quickly before heading over to the locker room to get changed for training. The room set up for training had once been decorated with a very blatant Hydra symbol on one wall, tentacles and all, which, how had no one noticed? Now it had been replaced with the bridge logo. Half the room was covered in mats, with some boxing bags and other martial arts tools set up. The other half was set up with weights and machines for lifting. I walked into the room in green shorts and a black t-shirt. Thankfully, there were a bunch of extra t-shirts and other clothes from S.H.I.E.L.D., so I had a wardrobe again. Natasha was waiting for me when I got there, Steve bench pressing at the other side as Sam ran on a treadmill, all of them wearing workout gear. Natasha smiled when I entered, the red-headed superhero dressed in a black tank top and red shorts. You ready to get my ass kicked by one of the best assassins in the world? I asked. Natasha gave me a slow smirk, striding barefoot across the mat to grab some hand wraps and toss them to me. As I put them on, she did the same. Actually, it's not just me, Natasha said. A loud bang came from behind me. I turned to see Steve rising from the bench press, where about 500 pounds had been set up. Apparently it was a light day. Sam hopped off the treadmill, and the two of them came over to join us. What, you guys are in on this? Sam grinned. Hey man, I'm here to get my ass kicked too. Yes, the former soldier is in trouble, I grunted, Sam chuckling. I put on my hand wraps and punched my fists together. Okay then, let's do this. Ow, 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 I grunted 2 hours later as Steve held an ice pack to my eye. He'd given me a hell of a right hook, and now I was sitting on a wooden bench as Natasha and Sam continued training. Sorry about that, Steve said, wincing. Well, I did get in a fight with a super soldier, I said, watching Sam and Natasha spar while Steve helped me out. I should have expected a few wounds. Just gonna be glad nothing is broken. Still, I should have been more careful. Steve sat down on the bench next to me. I'll be all right, I said simply, breathing heavily. Steve and Natasha had been pushing Sam and me hard. We were technically the most normal in our group, being normal humans without our equipment. Sam was a trained soldier, of course, but I was just a normal weightlifter, and neither of us had been trained to rip people in half with a lollipop the way most of the other Avengers had been. So they'd switched us between weightlifting and sparring, teaching us as quickly as possible while forcing us to keep moving. CrossFit had just become a thing in my world, but Steve and Natasha had mastered it in this one. The workout that forced you to lift weights and move quickly all at once. In other words, the workout made for superheroics. Good Lord, I was not a fan, and I was damn sore at this point. Sam was bouncing on his heels now, facing Natasha with a bit of nervousness in his eyes. Natasha was eyeing with a pleased look in her eyes. Funny, I said suddenly. This is how I started with you guys. Me, Sam, Natasha, and you. Steve blinked at that, then chuckled. Yeah, I guess it was. Thank you again. When I looked at him, he smiled. For everything. I've got Buck back. Everything else was worth it from there. I patted his shoulder, wincing at my sore muscles, but finishing the move. Of course. What are friends for, right? Steve smiled at that, then rose from the bench. Okay, ready to go again? I groaned, but put away the ice pack and rose up, raising my hands in front of my face. Okay, let's do it. Steve stepped forward, hands raised as well. Seconds later, a lightning-quick fist landed in my stomach, and I was waving a fist vaguely in Steve's direction while struggling to breathe as he showed me how to fight in the simplest ways possible. Later that night, I had dinner in the cafeteria. I was sitting at a table in the back when two people came over to sit across from me, and one next to me. I looked up at them, my fork full of spaghetti halfway to my mouth. Bobby and Hartley sat across from me. When I looked beside me, it was Mac, the tall and black engineer of the Iliad, with enough muscles to give Krill and Steve a run for their money. Don't let us stop you, Bobby said, noting how I'd stopped. I'm not. I put my spaghetti in my mouth and chewed, swallowing after a bit. I was just seeing who'd joined me. Hartley chuckled. Well, we wanted to get to know you since we're all Avengers and all. Not me, Mac said, raising a Philly cheesesteak up in his hands. I'm sticking with the Iliad. Y'all can stay here on the crazy house. Doesn't the Iliad have an alien artifact housed in its belly? I asked. Mac froze, then shrugged. It's locked up. Yay, I twirled a finger. As one of the people who is supposed to be studying that thing one day, I'm happy to hear it. Yeah, you've got a lot on your plate, don't you? Bobby asked. Creating tools for everyone avenging, and I heard you were planning on going on patrol with Iron Man tomorrow. Seriously, you're kinda everywhere. That's the benefit and the curse of the Omnitrix, I said around a mouthful of noodles and sauce. All the power and all the responsibility to go with it. Sounds stressful, Mac noted. Nah, you see the things he can do with that thing? Hartley asked, staring at the Omnitrix. Probably worth it. What? That doesn't freak you out? Mac asked. Changing your DNA every 5 seconds, turning into giant monsters? He shuddered. No thanks. Hell, I'd love to try, Bobby said, grinning. Not happening, I swallowed my food. This is the only thing that makes me special around here. I'm leaving it on forever. Oh, it's cute you're so possessive of it, Hartley patted me on the cheek, chuckling when I brushed her off. Anyways, I said quickly, what did you guys think of your first Avengers mission? Bobby and Hartley shared a look. It was weird, Bobby finally said thoughtfully. I thought it would be a lot like being an agent, but having that much superpowered support made it kind of relaxed. Like I didn't have to worry as much about getting hurt. Kind of ruined the fun for me, Hartley noted, flicking the steak knife in her hand at a high speed. I mean, I like a good fight, but knowing the bad guys have no chance kind of ruined it. Well, just wait, I grumbled. What do you mean? Mech asked. I looked up to see them all looking at me. I thought for a moment before sighing. Okay, so we only got Whitehall due to General Hale telling us about him. Before that, someone was keeping him secret, despite 2 AI and the entire world looking for Hydra. Maybe your AI malfunctioned, Mac asked. He was apparently not a fan of AI programs. No chance, I shook my head. X and Jarvis worked their asses off to find Hydra, and someone is actively fighting them off. Stearns is out there helping Hydra, which means it must be him. And if Stearns is helping Hydra, he's had 3 days to begin experimenting in earnest. What can Hydra do in 3 days? Bobby asked. Less than we can do in 1, I said, but they don't have our morals. Stearns was able to make Abomination with a few external factors and normal human intelligence. I shudder to think what he's capable of now. We know Hydra has the Chitauri armor and weapons, and Garrett is still out there with his centipede soldiers. We're in an arms race now, and I worry what Hydra is going to do to try and win it. We'll have the new armor and weapons done by tomorrow, and I guarantee it'll be better than anything even Stearns can make. But I'm still worried. By the way, what happened to your eye? Mac asked. I touched my new black eye and sighed. Never get into a fight with Captain America, Black Widow, and Falcon. Mac scoffed. You kidding? My mom didn't raise a fool. January 16th. Early in the morning, Pepper and I were waiting in Tony's room for the 2 people we'd invited. In the meantime, Pepper was helping me with something I'd never expected to need help with. We sat across from each other at a table, me wearing my usual costume while the Claytronics object creator was set up. So the woman's shelter you sent money to is going to be expanding now, Pepper said, handing me a piece of paper. The scholarship fund X set up is already getting requests, so Stark Industries will be helping with that, as well as the schools you requested we support. However, there is a problem with the work you wanted to be done in Hell's Kitchen. What? I asked, looking at the redhead. What's going on with that? Edgar didn't get the money? Edgar's mother is being brought to the States with the help of our legal team, Pepper said. But your purchase of that property in Hell's Kitchen is being fought by a company called Union Allied. My old employers? I asked, confused. Pepper nodded, looking worried. We'll look into it. In the meantime, we'll have our people work on the other stuff you wanted, the investments and such. But there are 2 other things. The messages you wanted to be sent to this. Pepper flipped through the papers. Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. Jessica has responded. Really? I thought she would. She said F you and the horse you rode in on. Pepper sounded amused. Keep in mind, she didn't actually say F. Now that sounds like what I expected, I said with a wince. And Luke? Not interested, Pepper shook her head. What were you hoping for? Why did you want us to reach out to them? X pointed out some people. I looked into them. Some people are important, Pepper. Important to varying degrees. But some people have potential, and those 2 are... Miss Potts, Mr. Shahade, Jarvis interrupted. Your 6 aimer has arrived. Pepper smiled. Thank you, Jarvis. Send them in. She looked at me. Are you sure you want to hire them? We already have good. Not a chance, I grinned. The door opened, and we rose up. 2 men walked into the room, both wearing suits. They were very different, for a number of reasons. One was overweight. The other was skinny and fit. One had long hair, the other had short hair, and some stubble. And the skinny one was carrying a cane and wearing shades. As the shorter one lead his clearly blind friend over, I stood up and walked around the table. I tried to remember how Wild Mutt would see the world and used that experience to watch how the blind man strode in, moving to intercept the pair. Good morning, guys, I said, holding a hand out. I'm Mahmoud Shahad, an Avenger. Oh, I know, the overweight took my hand, grinning. Foggy Nelson, good to meet you, man. I grinned, then remembered one of the bits of advice about how to interact with blind people, one of which was to introduce everyone in a group. Granted, he already knew she was there. But this is Pepper Potts, by the way. I finished shaking Foggy's hand, then looked at the blind man. And you're Matt Murdock, right? Yes, I am. He held his out in front of his about a foot to my left, and I moved around to take it. Good to meet you. Likewise. Man, my life is so freaking awesome sometimes. January 16th. Please sit, Pepper said gently, gesturing to the chairs at the table. Oh, thank you, Matt said politely, Foggy leading him to a chair. The two sat down, followed by Pepper and me. So, Foggy started. You said you wanted to hire us for a case? No, I said simply. I want both of you on retainer, working for me. Matt raised an eyebrow at that. And what exactly would that entail? Well, let's see. I let out a breath. You both left Landerman and Zach recently, right? Can I ask why? Foggy seemed nervous. Well, it was more of a mutual agreement to leave, you understand. We had philosophical differences, Matt said, leaning forward in his seat. They were helping scumbag companies get away with killing people, I said simply. Foggy and Matt seemed surprised at that. Stark Industries made some inquiries, Pepper said with a smile. Look, here's the thing, I rubbed at my nose, leaning forward. I got some money while taking down Hydra, enough to set me up for the rest of my life. And I want to use it to do some good. So I'd like to share it with you. All I ask is that you use the money I give you to help people pro bono. Any expenses paid by me, from real estate assistance, whatever you need. In return, you guys help the helpless, make sure people stay safe. Matt seemed to raise an eyebrow at that. I wondered what the man who would one day become, or maybe already was, Daredevil, was hearing in my heartbeat. What? Foggy seemed focused on something else. What sort of retainer are we talking about? Pepper smiled, opening a folder and passing it to Foggy. She opened another, this one in Braille, and passed it to Matt. 100,000 a month, I told them. All I ask is that you guys do your work, keep Hell's Kitchen safe. Get me? Matt was surprised, his eyebrows high. Foggy looked like all his Christmas had come at once. Why us? Matt asked. Matt, Foggy said, smiling nervously. Should we really be asking this very nice man why he's willing to pay us so much? Foggy chuckled, and I grinned. I simply wish to know, Matt said with a smile, why you want us specifically. For that kind of money, you can hire far more experienced lawyers. Don't tell him that, Foggy mumbled. When I first started doing the hero thing, I started in Hell's Kitchen, I said, leaning back in my seat. Taking down drug dealers, pimps, thugs, thieves, anyone who had a reason to attack a person in the area. Then I expanded to do the same for New York City. I did a lot of work there, and not just me. There's someone else, a vigilante who recently started doing the same thing. Matt didn't bat an eye at that. I want Hell's Kitchen to be safe, and you two want to go to work there. I think that in many ways our interests align, Mr. Murdock. I think we can help each other. Matt rubbed his chin for a moment. I think, for just a moment, he was considering saying no, just for the hell of it, or cause it sounded suspicious as hell. I was leaning towards the later, in which case I would have simply put the money into something else. Instead, he moved his hands across the contract, reading the Braille for a moment before nodding. Very well, Mr. Shuckett. I think we'd like some time to read this over. Yes, we can, I rose up. We can meet again whenever you're available. Who knows, you might see me in Hell's Kitchen one night. Matt laughed. Yes, I'm sure I will. Thank you again, Foggy said, grinning as he shook my hand. Then Pepper's. Once done with that, the pair left, with Foggy's voice slightly echoing after the door closed behind him. I'm still not sure what you see in them, Pepper said. I mean, they're both clearly smart, at least according to their grades and their work at Landerman and Zach, but we do have more experienced lawyers. Just trust me, I said, running a hand through my hair. Meantime, you should get ready. Pepper smiled, then raised a hand. A second later, a purple gauntlet flew through the window to wrap around her arm. More armor pieces flew to land on her form until she was in the full armor of the rescue unit. You changed the color, I noted. Red and black wasn't doing it for me, she said, as her helmet landed in her hands. She placed it on her head, the now purple and silver headpiece moving around to enshroud her. Tony, she said, voice slightly altered. You ready? "Since this morning," Tony's voice said through our comms. A loud roaring sound came from the window, and Iron Man dropped into view to float in front of the window. "Pepper, dial," Tony said. "Shall we?" I grinned and ran towards the open window next to Pepper. I leaped out of the open window and into the skies over New York. I fell for a while, passing windows and rooftops, the chilly morning winds rushing past me as the city streets came closer and closer. Then I tapped the Omnitrix and changed in a flash of bright green light. Astrodactyl. I pulled up at the last minute, about a foot over a yellow cab as people watched, and flew upwards in a quick burst of green star power. Pepper joined me and we flew through the streets. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" Iron Man asked as he flew down to join me. "I've always wanted to do a Ronsky feint, now I can do it whenever I want." "Squawk," I said with a grin. "That really does look scary," Pepper noted as she twirled in the air, looking very graceful in her purple armor. The three of us went deeper into New York City, Tony and I on patrol, Pepper simply flying alongside her boyfriend. A good way to start off the day. Director Maria Hill of Bridge. Maria walked into the interrogation room with Fury on her right side, and her new deputy director Victoria Hand on the left. Sitting at the table was one Brigadier General Hale, a member of the United States Air Force, who had defected from Hydra in return for several stipulations. Maria sat down in front of her, and Hale blinked in surprise. Things must have changed if you're Maria's lackey, Fury." Fury smirked. "Oh, quite a bit has changed. After all, you gave yourself up with barely a fight, didn't you?" "With none at all, if I remember," Victoria said, flipping her trademark pink stripped hair back. Hale smiled a bit, looking chagrined. "I suppose a lot has changed." Maria held a hand out and Victoria passed her a tablet. "We've been looking at the conditions you gave us in return for information on Hydra. You understand some of it will have to be negotiated, and the information will have to be confirmed. Some stuff you asked for just won't be possible." "Like what?" Hale's eye narrowed, her posture stiffened. "Well, you won't be getting off scot-free. We will have to give you some jail time," Maria said. "Even with the information you've given, those in the world's governments will want to come after you purely for your association with Hydra." Hale had clenched her hands together, but she only nodded tightly rather than contesting that. Not what she was worried about then. Maria had a guess as to Hale's true priorities. "And then there is your daughter, Ruby Hale." Maria watched the fire rise in Hale's eyes. "Jackpot. Ruby is innocent," Hale said harshly. "She's just a child raised to be a killer," Fury replied, resting his hands flat on the table. "She's got skills that can't be denied. Not many 14-year-old girls who can fight my best." Fury winced, looking at Maria. "Sorry, force of habit. Our best." Maria nodded gracefully, acknowledging the slip. "She's been trained, no doubt about it, but she's still a young girl. Quite frankly, it's hard to tell what we should do with her." "Train her further," Hale said, imploring. "Keep her safe. I'll give every bit of information I have. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please, don't hurt Ruby." Maria scoffed. "Hale, did you think for a second we were planning on hurting your daughter? Dissecting her the way Whitehall was planning?" Maria tutted, shaking her head from side to side. "No, but we can't exactly make a brainwash." "She wasn't brainwashed," Hale protested. "Raised in a Hydra facility while being told over and over to obey, kill, and worship the chain of command." Victoria strode around to look down at Hale, her high heels clicking with each step. "Brainwashing doesn't just mean chemistry and technology. Ruby will need serious deprogramming to be seen as anywhere close to normal. But she can be useful," Hale glared at Victoria. "Ruby just wants to fulfill her purpose, to be a hero." "Yes, she's been raised to be a warrior." "A killer," Fury interrupted, shrugging at the glare Hale gave him. "She's still a young girl," Hale said softly. "She can be a good shield agent. She won't be able to integrate into society. I know that. I want my daughter to have a home, to be safe, and to live her life." Maria leaned back in her chair, resting her hand against her fingers. "So you want us to, what? Take Ruby and groom her to become an agent?" "She's already got the training," Hale said. "You take care of her, make her strong, and I promise she can be an asset." In return, I'll give you everything I have. Every base. Everyone who is still active. This information is current. But not for long. Hydra will move everything the second you give them a chance. You've already attacked Whitehall, haven't you? None of the three answered, and Hale nodded. Protect my daughter, train her, and I'll give you anything you want, Hale said. No attempt to make things easier on you? Victoria asked curiously. Just Ruby, I went into this knowing I made my bed, Hale said, clenching her hands together. Maria smiled slightly and slid the tablet towards Hale. I think we might be able to work something out. As Hale read the tablet, Maria looking at Fury, who nodded. Maria was still getting used to being director. In some ways, nothing had changed. The paperwork had increased, and she had to manage not only the organization, but also Tony, Dial, and the other Avengers, all of whom needed to be kept under watch, simply so she wouldn't be left surprised the next time they suggested something crazy. But this was part of her old work, convincing someone to do something she'd already planned on. Ruby Hale could be an asset. Not now, but in 4 years, a former ticking time bomb could become something very, very useful. Natasha already had thoughts on that. They'd help her, and if Ruby wanted a normal life, they would let her. Until then, she'd be kept out of the fight, but continue being groomed for it. Mahmoud Shahir Dale. Later, we got bad news. Sharon and Trip had been kidnapped. Any news? I asked as I walked into the Avengers Tower briefing room. Every Avenger, Coulson's team, Director Maria Hill, and Deputy Director Victoria Hand were all there. Tony and I had arrived as soon as we heard. Nothing yet, Coulson said, his voice tight with anger. We have video footage of it, though. Tony. On it, Tony waved his hands and the new hologram tech we'd made sprouted in the middle of the room. It was extremely clear, made to mimic physical objects as perfectly as possible. Jarvis. Actually, sir, Axe's southern tone interrupted. I was involved. I believe I have the most pertinent information. Tony frowned, thrown at the sudden interruption. Go ahead, X, I said. Roll the footage. Give us 3D. Sure. Go ahead, Tony grumbled. Not like it's my lab. Sorry, I said, chagrined. Tony waved it off and soon X brought up a scale model of the streets of Washington. As you can see, we registered the presence of an unknown Quinjet flying towards Agent Carter and Agent Triplet shortly after they left the newly bought home of Margaret Elizabeth Peggy Carter. Steve and Bucky's jaws tightened in unison at that. I attempted to warn them, and Hydra made their move. The Quinjet dropped an unidentified enhanced individual. The view zoomed in on the streets until Sharon and Trip were sitting in a car in front of us, as though they had appeared out of thin air. As we watched, a woman dropped out of the sky to land in front of them. Axe paused the footage, and Tony, Steve, Maria and I walked over to look at her. She was wearing a tank top and military pants, the boots she was wearing stretched out by clawed feet. Tall, even taller than Krill or Steve, built with incredible muscles, from her 8-pack abs to her enormous biceps, all in a feminine form. Her skin was dark green and covered with what seemed like scales, spikes in her elbows, her fingers clawed, and her eyes glowing a pale yellow, her green hair pulled into a ponytail. I really hope that isn't what I think it is, Bruce said grimly, as he looked upon the individual in question. Gamma enhanced, I said after a moment. Silently I thought of her as a Shia-Babin. Crime scene forensics did find some high levels of gamma radiation. Axe confirmed. Stearns, Bruce said, sounding disappointed. Not necessarily, Simmons replied. The centipede serum has gamma radiation, maybe. No, Bruce removed his glasses. No one has been able to make a true monster like me, or Blonsky. This is Stearns. Forget how she got her powers, Maria said, crossing her arms. X, show us the rest. Of course, Director, X continued the footage. We watched Sharon and Trip try to escape, only to get chased by the woman in question. I tried to remember who she was in particular, but nothing came to mind. Maybe the Abominatrix? She didn't look as bulky as her, though. Whoever she was, she had standard Hulk set of strength, including the ability to jump massive distances and the fact she could outrun cars on foot. She had used it to catch up to Trip and Sharon, who tried to fight back as the Hydra Quinjet flew overhead. She stopped them by pulling the engine out of the car, catching and injecting Trip with something, then doing the same to Sharon. She picked them both up, then leaped into the Hydra Quinjet with the pair. Ix followed the Quinjet until it crashed into a barn, then the footage got grainy. "This is bad," I said, crossing my arms, "and not just because they have two of ours. Trip and Sharon have information on a lot of what we've been doing," Coulson said grimly. "We need to move on our current operations and get them back." "You really think they took them for information?" Steve asked. He looked apocalyptic. He wasn't angry, but there was a chill in his eyes. "Maybe," Maria sat down in a chair, rubbing her eyes. "Hydra has been in hiding for all this time. Why attack now?" "Maybe they need something?" Skye asked. "Something Sharon and Trip have." "Well, they're clearly making super soldiers," Bobby said. "She was powerful. If they have more like her, they might be able to take the fight to us." "I wouldn't want to fight her alone," Sam noted, looking over the tall, monstrous-looking and buxom superhuman, "let alone if they've got more like her." "They'd need the gene," Bruce said. "People who have the gamma gene are rare." "Even then, we're not exactly playing catch-up," Tony said. "They're the ones hiding from us. We might as well start hunting." "Agreed." Maria walked over to the center of the room. "Hydra made an attack on us. We need to find Trip and Sharon and take down Hydra in general. General Hale has given us another group of targets in return for the protection of her daughter. I'm sending in Sam and his team to one, Steve's to another, and Coulson will go with Hand to the last." Victoria Hand, who had been simply watching, stepped forward. "Each team has one goal that supersedes all others. Find the main ones behind all of this. Whoever is making new super soldiers, wherever they are, we need to get them. You have the approval of the Council. Now get to work." Tony, Fitz, and I stood watching as the Claytronics object creator did its work. The arms inside shifted back and forth, forming a chest plate. The plate was striped red, blue, and white, with a star in the center. "I wish we had more time," Fitz said, rubbing his chin, "to run tests, make sure they work, let alone for the specialized gear." Fitz put his hands on his hips and moved around as the chest plate dissolved into dust. A pair of arm gauntlets were being created next. "It'll work, Ross," Tony said. "The tech is sound, and I made sure everything was made the way the gang wanted them." "Including mine," I said, as the COC. "Oh God, that is a terrible acronym. I need to come up with something else." I focused on what popped out from a port in the machine, a small backpack, the kind people used on long hikes or rock climbing. Fitz took the backpack, only to yelp as it almost pulled him to the floor. "Careful, Ross," Tony said, taking the backpack from Fitz with a chuckle. "It's Cap's, remember. He wears the heavy gear because he likes emasculating lesser men like us." "How heavy?" "Because that felt like it was made from rocks," Fitz said, rubbing his arms. "Good Lord." "It's Cap," I said. "He thinks 500 pounds is a light workout. Even that," I pointed at the backpack, "is going to be lightweight." "Yeah, well, he still didn't let me put in the cool stuff," Tony said, sighing. "No repulsors, no cool guns, no flight, just some small enhancements and jump jets." Surprised he actually wanted it bulletproof at this point. "It'll do the job." I watched Tony put the backpack away. Bucky asked for the same sort of setup. Creel and Bruce didn't want anything at all. "Well, at least Sam let me fix him up," Tony said, still grumbling. "Anyways, we've got everyone's new designs all good to go." "Hell of a test run," Fitz said, grumbling. "At least we know the guns work." I looked over at an armory rack that was filled with weapons. After some thought, I walked over to the rack and picked up 3 things. A black handle to a sword with a hole where the blade would usually be, and a handgun and rifle that both looked very sci-fi in style, big and boxy. "Whoa," Fitz said as I placed the weapons to the side, replacing my Glock 19 with the handgun. "You really need all those? I mean, with the Omnitrix, if it times out, I might need the BCWs even with the armor," I said. "I still like that name, by the way," Tony said with a grin as I looked over my new weapons, "because it's wrong. Kinda funny." I smiled sadly. "Yeah, well, I wanted something to, memorialize someone I respected greatly. So the BCWs, Weapons of the Future." Model 1, Model 2, Model 3, I patted the handgun, rifle and handle in sequence. Well, let's get the gear to the others, Tony said. Time to party. The reserve Avengers, the team I was on, got into my Quinjet, the Defiant, and headed out. Sam went through the rundown as X flew us there. There were 7 of us. Sam, aka Falcon, stood in the center, Rhodey next to him with the War Machine armor hanging behind him. Bobby and Hartley sat next to each other. Bucky was in the back, his arms crossed. I moved from the cockpit to the back, and Krill, who was leaning next to the door to the cockpit, flickered his eyes to me before looking back at Falcon. Once we were together, Sam began. "Here's what we got," Sam said. A holographic image of the complex we were attacking, appearing in the center of the Defiant's cargo bay, all of us gathering around it. In the desert of Texas, Hydra has maintained a facility where they keep their rejects. The experiments that failed were unstable or just not as powerful as they hoped. This includes corpses, but they also hold prisoners, Sam said. The Falcon crossing his arms, they call it the graveyard. "Why does Hydra always go for the obviously evil names?" I asked, growling. Bucky nodded from the back. "Okay, here's what we know." Sam twisted the hologram for a moment, then furrowed his brow when it twisted into a ball. "Here, let me," I said, moving forward and putting the complex back to normal, then zooming in on it. "Thanks," Sam said. "Okay, the complex is in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, resting to the east. This place has a hangar and a bunch of tanks and heavy machine-ins, so Deal, War Machine, and I will work on taking out those. Creel, Barnes, Hartley, and Morse. You 4 will go in and take out the base personnel. Remember, the priority is taking the base commander. The Avengers and Bridge have the same mission for their targets. We'll also try to help the prisoners if we can, but that's a secondary objective." Sam frowned at that, clearly displeased. I couldn't say I was happy either. Any failed experiments Hydra had would be down there, both people and animals. Whatever we found could be innocent, but they could also be insane killers. I reached for my sidearm and took it out, looking it over for a moment. "Okay, everyone has the new gear." Creel looked at his arm. While he was wearing his usual combination of a tank top and jeans, he now also wore a large device wrapped around his arm in the shape of an arm guard one would see in a Greek or Roman army, colored a deep black. He focused, and his skin changed to a dark steel color, then into granite, marble, blue cloth, rubber, and then the familiar shine of vibranium black with lines of glowing blue for the raw version, and the more steel-like version for the color of the processed stuff like Cap's shield. There was barely a sliver of either in the gauntlet, but they'd been taken from the piece we'd gotten when we'd captured him, enough to let him change. "I'm good," Creel said. The rest of the group picked up the small backpacks hanging along the wall. Bobby seemed a bit nervous. "So, how does this work?" she asked, while looking the pack over. "You say moon prism power, make up, and the armor will appear," I said, straight-faced. Bobby stared at me, looking horrified. "Are you serious?" I grinned. "Nah, just say your code name." "Oh, thank God," Bobby said, punching me in the arm. "You know I hate that show." "You have no taste," Hartley, Rhodey, and I said in unison, sharing a grin. Bobby snorted. "Whatever." "Okay," she took a deep breath, then slid her purple backpack on. "Mockingbird." The backpack on Bobby's back shifted around to surround her body. The small catons moved around like purple liquid, surrounding her chest across her abdomen, then down to her legs. Then they solidified in a single moment. Bobby gasped, looking down at herself. She'd designed the armor herself, making the chest, abdomen, and inner thighs a shade of white, and the rest a combination of purple and black. The very center above her abdomen was triangular, with a glowing purple light that strummed. Her boots had a small purple force field hovering just above them, and her batons now had purple highlights. Bobby looked at her hands, the blonde grinning at the sight of the light armor gauntlets surrounding her fingers. "Whoa, this is cool." Bobby twisted her hands, and a helmet rose over her head, a pointed design with a long slit where her eyes were that glowed purple against the white of her helmet. A hood sprouted over her head with another of her wrists, colored dark purple as well. She twisted her hands one more time, and the helmet and hood faded. leaving Bobby grinning at us. "Oh, that is awesome. Wait, what is this?" She tapped her chest on the logo of a bird holding an arrow. "It's I coughed before lying. "A mockingbird. You can get rid of it, but I thought it was good." "Ha! I like it." "Good to know," I said with a grin. "How about you guys?" The others rushed to put their packs on, while I left mine on the floor. Hartley turned hers on first. Unlike the others, she had a small backpack, a jacket, and a fanny pack to put on, all of which weighed quite a bit. She struggled a bit, and Creel moved forward to help her with the jacket. "Thanks, handsome," Hartley said with a wink. Creel smirked at that, stepping back to let her settle. Warrior, with the call of her codename, Isabel Hartley was covered in her armor. She looked very different from Bobby, for good reason. When we'd created the armor designs, we gave people 3 options. Bobby had chosen the light gear, made for fighters who favored movement over durability. I'd chosen the medium personally, wanting to be able to move, but also knowing I wasn't as fast as everyone else. Steve and Bucky had been 2 of the 3 who had gone for heavy armor, and those 2 had gone without the strength enhancers. Hartley had chosen the heavy variant as well, and she had the strength-enhancing gear to boot. She rose up several inches in height, and a thick plate of armor ran across her body, covering her shoulders, her thighs, shins, all the way to her boots. She was dressed in over 300 pounds of weight, all of it having been spread between the backpack, fanny pack, and jacket to make it somewhat manageable. But portions of the Catums settled into an exoskeleton under her armor, enhancing her strength. She raised her arms up with ease, grinning happily at her gold and black patterned armor. She had a small skirt at her waist, evocative of Xena, warrior princess's skirt, which I found kinda funny. She put a hand to her waist, where the handle of a Model 3 BCW quickly formed from the Catums. She clenched the handle and raised it, smiling viciously as a blade grew from the handle to make it into a short knife. She held it sideways and furrowed her brow in concentration, grinning when the blade extended into a massive broadsword, portions of her gauntlets moving into the blade to give it the extra material. "Whoa!" Bobby leaned back as the 3-foot blade grew in her direction, dodging it. "Careful." "Oh, sorry." Hartley, embarrassed, shortened the sword back into a knife, then back to a handle, putting it away. She put the Model 3 away at her waist, then brought her arms up and twisted her wrists. Her helmet came across her face and solidified into a smooth, round metal helmet that was tinged with gold around the black sections, shaped like that of a Roman soldier's. Underneath, I knew that she was currently getting an augmented reality view of the world, the suit's Vi helping her through the cameras and sensors. And I did mean Vi Jarvis, ex-Tony, Fitzsimmons, Bruce, Jury Rig, Sky, and everyone else had made sure I didn't make another accidental AI. I was very keen on not giving ex-accidental siblings. Bucky went next, as Hartley put her helmet away. Unlike Hartley, his armor was in the form of a single large backpack, which had to weigh around 500 pounds. He flipped onto his back with ease and said his codename. "Nomad," he said, not raising his voice the way Hartley and Bobby had. The large backpack shifted in an instant, covering his entire body. He twisted his hands immediately, his helmet rising to move over his face. His suit was black with green circuitry running through it, blending in with his robotic arm. The chest plate was thick across his pectorals, and the armor ran down his abdomen in extra plates. His thighs and shins were just as heavily armored. Yet, despite the enormous amounts of plating and a lack of an exoskeleton like Hartley's, Bucky moved very easily in the suit. The helmet that rose over his head was unsettling. Like a bird of prey, somehow, there was a scope-style eyepiece over the left eye of the helmet that glared out at us with a bright green light. He twisted his hands again, and the green lights on the suit faded to black. Another twist of his wrists and his entire body faded away. Active camouflage. There was an unsettling click I recognized as the Model 2 BCW rifle. The next moment he was sitting in his seat, holding the sniper version of the rifle in his lap, making us jump at his sudden and silent move. He kept the helmet on. On the center of his chest, barely visible, was a star, imprinted on the black of his armor. "Geez," Rhodey and I said in unison. Rhodey looked at me, and I shrugged. Bucky, I said with a scowl. Can you be less sneaky when I'm around? Normal guy here. Bucky chuckled a little, twisting his hands to put away the helmet. You did good work. I can barely feel the weight too. It's over 500 pounds, I grumbled, looking over at Sam. He was putting his wing pack on his back, and I did the same with my own small backpack. With a shared look, we said out code names together. Still blew my mind that I had a cool code name. Dial Falcon. Just like that, our suits rose across our bodies. Falcon's focused on his chest and wing pack, leaving large portions of his body free. His gauntlets had repulsor weapons on the back, and his guns had changed to become Model 1 variants on his hips. His boots gained rocket ports, and his wing pack was streamlined into a smooth black variant. I knew that the wings had been similarly changed. Sam twisted his wrists, and a pair of goggles appeared over his eyes. Another twist and a mask made of metal appeared. It was tight to his head, with the shape of the goggles over his eyes, and a mouthpiece that connected to an air tank on his wing pack. His chest plate had a symbol of an falcon in red, feathers spread out across the black. Sam flicked out his arms and his wings snapped outwards. He grinned at them, bringing his hands up. Okay, we're good to go. My own suit was simple in design. A chest plate with an angular design, armored shoulders, gauntlets that left my elbows open, and the Omnitrix available. I wore armor on my legs and boots. The whole suit was colored black with green circuitry, with the Omnitrix symbol on the center of my chest. I made sure my ponytail was still in place, and touched my beard, sighing in relief when they were intact. With a snap to the side, one of my gauntlets sprouted a blade from the top in a burst of Catham's moving. Whoa, can mine do that? Hartley asked, excitedly snapping arms out. She giggled when 2 blades sprouted from her gauntlets. Rhodey smirked at the newbies with their power suits and got into his own. The war machine, newly upgraded and repaired, snapped over his body, turning him into the tallest person in the room. Okay, kids, how about we get down to business? He's right, Sam put his wings away. Arm up and get ready. X, you ready? We'll be there in 1 minute, X responded. I turned and grabbed my weapons, putting my handgun in my leg holster, my rifle against my back, and my melee handle to my waist. Okay, you all look pretty now, Creel grumbled. Can we do this already? Jealous? Hartley asked mischievously. More like anxious, Creel smirked. You heard Sam. Failed experiments. That means monsters. Probably an alien situation. What, like Thor or the Chitauri? Bucky asked curiously. It was a reminder that he knew less about pop culture than even Steve at the moment. Hydra apparently never thought the knowledge would be useful for a super assassin. Well, we ain't Marines, Rhodey said, striding to the center of the room. So we should be okay. In their defense, Hollywood isn't a fan of useful tactics in horror movies, I said weakly. Hollywood? Bucky frowned. Why are you taking about horror movies? Like Frankenstein? Pop culture night's going to get full, Hartley noted, giving Bucky a sad look. If we ever have time for a pop culture night, Bobby sighed sadly. Creel patted Bucky on the back, before moving with the rest of us towards the back of the Defiant, Bucky following while grumbling. Not my fault Hydra never let me watch movies, he said. He seemed to withdraw a bit, despite the joking nature of his comment. I put a hand on his shoulder when I noticed. Bucky gave me a quick glance, then smiled a bit. With a twist of his wrists, his helmet appeared, and we both focused on the door. X began the countdown, and I brought the Omnitrix up, twisting the dial. In 3, 2, 1, X said calmly, guiding the Quinjet down towards the ground. Closer and closer, until the Defiant came to a stop. Drop! The door snapped down and we all leaped out into the air about 10 feet over the ground. X spun the Defiant around and opened up its guns. The fight was on. Director Maria Hill. As the Avengers, Reserve Avengers, and Bridge went on their missions, Maria had business of her own. She walked through the hallways of the Enterprise, Robert Gonzalez with her this time. The older Bridge agent kept pace with her as they strode through the helicarrier. Gonzalez, I want the Iliad out and doing its work. How are the upgrades going? They're going well, Gonzalez said, his voice low and gravely. Mac has installed most of it with Fitz's help. We should be ready to leave for the work soon. Will you be keeping my best agents with your little Avengers team? Maria looked over at Gonzalez, who seemed sour. You wanted someone you trusted to keep an eye on Creel and Bucky. They're doing it. And now I worry if I've given them up for a new job, Gonzalez grumbled. Robert, Maria began to say. He waved it off, sighing grumpily. They're grown women. If they want to continue, they'll do it. If they want to come back, I'll welcome them with open arms. Gonzalez stopped when they came to a door where Coulson and May were waiting. Keep them safe, Director. Those two saved my life. I wouldn't do any less, Maria said warmly. Gonzalez nodded. He turned to Coulson and May. I suppose I will see you both later? No doubt about it, Coulson with a smile. May simply nodded, though she smiled as well. With that, Gonzalez turned and walked away. He's kind of intense, May said. Maria and Coulson gave the famously stoic May a look. She cocked an eyebrow, daring them to say anything. Since neither Maria nor Coulson were that dumb, Coulson instead opened the door. Inside, a woman was sitting at a chair in front of a steel table, wearing a white prison uniform. She was wearing a metal collar that was a familiar black with green circuitry. Davida DeVito looked up at the three and smiled. Yeah, you didn't bring my boyfriend, she said in joking tones. Maria cocked an eyebrow, moving to sit in front of her. Boyfriend? What else do you call a guy who gets you a ring as fancy as this? Davida tapped the collar, smirking. Despite her seeming jovialness, she was clearly not pleased with the collar. Maria was glad for it, considering it was keeping her powers in check. Davida's eyes narrowed. My girls, are they safe? They are. Maria took out a tablet. You were right. They were checking that Facebook profile. We got in contact with them last night. Got to say, kinda clever of you, Coulson added. Post a specific status on a read profile at a specific time using newly made accounts. Clever way to pass messages. Well, it ain't foolproof, but it gets the job done, Davida leaned forward. Are they safe? Tell me that. Maria raised an eyebrow. Yes, they are. Helen is cooperating, but she thinks Strucker may be onto her, that he's guiding your girls specifically to places and missions that Helen believes Strucker is willing to let go of, using them in some game against the other Hydra leaders. Davida's fist tightened. Then get them out of there. You know our deal, I promised you. I promised that they would be safe for traded information, Hill said calmly. She eyed Davida carefully. In the days since Dial had captured her, Davida had been almost obsessive of wanting her girls to be safe. She wanted them away from Strucker and safe from prosecution, in return for all the information Bridge could get. But as of now, the data Helen, Marion, and Mimi had gotten them was minuscule. They'd been kept from knowing exactly where the castle they were in was placed in through blind flights to and from the castle. Had only bare information on the experiments and nothing on the future plans of Strucker's Hydra. The only reason Helen had received the message was a phone she'd smuggled onto the grounds, and even GPS wasn't able to find them for some reason, most likely Stern's, which made the fact she could even access the internet despite him very suspect. Maria was still grateful for the information, of course. Thanks to them, they now knew more about the structure of Strucker's organization than they ever had, including that Wolfgang von Strucker was in charge of anything substantial. But Davida needed to know the truth. Strucker and Stearns are playing games, and we think your girls are being played like pieces on the board, Maria said simply. We'll work to protect them, May added. The Avengers will do their best to save them, but they need to keep playing along. You can't guarantee that, Davida said viciously. Tell me why I shouldn't just fight my way out and get them myself. The collar on her neck began to glow a brighter green along the lines of circuitry. A bead of sweat appeared on Davida's face as she fought the dampening effects of the collar. May shifted her feet and moved her hands slightly, face hardening. Davida and May eyed each other, and the tension rose. Until Coulson stepped forward. Actually, if I may interrupt the imminent catfight. Davida and May glared at him. Coulson smiled genially in response. We have two people who were kidnapped. Friends who, your team says, are there. We have as much to gain from finding that castle as you do. Maybe we can make a deal, something worth your while. Davida frowned as Maria hid a smile. Good old Coulson, the master of communication. Mahmoud Shahed, dial. Rhodey and Sam took off as soon as they jumped out of the Defiant, flying into the air. The others and I landed on the ground with ease, and I reached for my back to flip my rifle into my hand, twisting my wrists to activate my helmet. My rounded helmet snapped into place around my head, and the augmented reality vision activated. It connected with my rifle, showing how much ammunition I had, and providing me with the crosshairs like in a standard FPS. With a thought, I switched to ammo type I wanted, and looked around with my gun raised the way Natasha and Sam had taught me. Damn, I felt badass. Yes, it would have been easier to simply change into an alien, but some part of me wanted to play with my new toys. We'd landed in the middle of a tarmac, Sam and Rhodey taking off towards a hangar as planned. I ran to join them while the others headed towards the prison complex. I almost stumbled as I ran. My speed had been massively enhanced, and it took a bit to how fast I was now moving. I tried to remember how Fast Track ran, and soon strode across the asphalt at high speed. I tensed my legs for a moment, and leaped upwards. The jump jets in the suit activated. Yeah, I let out in excitement as I leaped forward a superhuman distance and height, propelled by the jets. I landed, then leaped again. It's like Saints Row 4. I took a moment to realize what a giant nerd I was, then focused on the job. The hangar Sam and Rhodey were headed towards was blocked by a group of soldiers in brown camo gear, tanks and jeeps. Some helicopters' rotors were spinning, about to take off. The Defiant flew over my head, and Rhodey and my Quinjet took off towards the helicopters, leaving Sam and me to take care of the soldiers in front of us. The soldiers had seen us coming and aimed their guns. I knelt down and brought a hand up. They started shooting at Sam, who simply twisted in the air to dodge their gunfire. When they shot at me, I activated one of my suit's abilities. A portion of my suit's armor grew from my gauntlet to form a shield in front of me, and I took a moment to grin as bullets bounced off the shield in front of me. "Eat your heart out, Steve," I said. Granted, Steve's shield was much more invincible, but it still felt cool to hold a shield as it vibrated under dozens of bullets slammed into it. The shield was tall and thick, with 2 prongs on the bottom. A quick bit of focus created cameras at the edges of the shield, and the side facing me became clear, showing me that there were 23 men shooting at me. Though some were aiming at Sam, none of their bullets would have been able to pierce my armor, but I decided to stick with the shield for now. "You got this?" Sam asked, diving in the air. "Got to use that time at the range for something." I brought my rifle up to a port on the side of my shield and remembered what I'd been taught. I took a deep breath, relaxed my body, aimed for the chest, and fired a single ISA, hitting a soldier in over his heart. He went down, and the other soldiers ducked. Deep breath, relax, fire. I missed that time, shaking a little, and focused again to hit a Hydra soldier in the chest again. I fired again and again, missing a couple of times, but managing to do well enough to take 6 men down. Granted, my helmet's enhanced vision, my shield, and the advanced weaponry gave me something similar to auto-aim in video games, but I felt pride nonetheless. Sam was still flying towards the hangar. The big doors to the hangar were closed, so Sam raised his hands. He must have forgotten that his comms were on, because I heard his next muttered words. "Hope these don't explode." I took a moment to feel offended on behalf of Tony. Then Sam raised his hands up, and a familiar pair of energy blasts flew from his hands to slam into the doors of the hangar, blasting them apart with the repulsors on his arms. "Yes," Sam cried out, diving into the hangar. I felt a bit of pride in seeing the armor I'd contributed on work so well. At least until the tank spun its turret to aim at me. Yeah, new awesome armor or not, I wasn't going to test it against a tank shell, no matter what Fitz and Tony said about its durability and force fields. I thought of changing the rifle to its deadlier mode, but decided to simply reach for the Omnitrix and twist. When the tank fired, I was already pressing down on the Omnitrix and leaping 30 feet in the air. I changed in a burst of green light as a shell exploded into the ground below. Swamp fire! Sam flew towards the hangar as I landed from my jump. The soldiers fired on me, tearing through my form. I ignored the bullets to rip some seed pods out of my arms and toss them at the 3 tanks. They exploded, wrapping around the tanks with their powerful vines. The tanks struggled to move, turrets grinding, and I allowed myself a grin at the sound of metal bending under the grip of my vines, the plant life around me singing triumphantly. The soldiers were still shooting at me. I raised my hands. "Better run," I yelled as flames came to life in my palms. The soldiers ducked behind the tanks and jeeps into cover, and I waited long enough to let them before unleashing hell. "Woo!" I shouted triumphantly, letting 2 long plumes of flame out to ignite the air in front of me. I kept the flames up long enough to make sure the soldiers were pinned for the next step of my plan. I stopped releasing one of the streams with my right hand, using that hand to grab more seed pods out of me, throwing them like grenades where the vines wrapped around the soldiers and jeeps. By the time I was done, 6 soldiers had been icered, 17 were wrapped in vines, and more were blocked from leaving their vehicles by the vines growing over them. I tapped the Omnitrix as soon as I knew the soldiers were captured. "Astrodactyl, this is Doyle. Squawk," I cried out, blasting into the air and snapping my wings out. "Falcon, I'm coming to help." A loud explosion came from over where the helicopters had been about to take off. "This is X, taking Overwatch position," the Defiant rose into the air. "War Machine, heading to rendezvous with Dial and Falcon." Rhodey flew alongside me as we headed to the hangar. "Roger that," Sam responded. "Team B, how's it going?" Rhodey and I flew into the hangar. The building was massive, filled with aircraft and vehicles of all kinds, the largest of which was a giant cargo plane. There were dozens of men inside, Sam fighting them. He hovered in the air and raised his hands, repulsors letting loose in his palms. He twirled out of the way of a burst from a machine gun, blasting the offending soldier into a jeep behind him. "I feel less special now," Rhodey mused next to me, taking a spot at the doors Sam had blown apart. He started shooting his own repulsor blasts, the minigun on his shoulder roaring. I flew to the upper level of the hangar, twirling to kick one of the many soldiers scrambling on the upper level in the chest with my clawed feet, before sliding to a stop on the floor. My wings pulling in, I let out an energy whip from my left arm and twirled it with instinctive expertise to grab another soldier, pulling him in for a clothesline, then released an energy blast from my right hand that sent another man to the ground. A Hydra operative raised his gun to shoot me, and I sliced it in half with my energy whip, offhandedly shooting another soldier in the back as he tried to run. "This is Mockingbird. We're facing some opposition." I heard the crack of ICEs being fired, followed by Creel roaring in rage and Hartley laughing over the comms. "Barnes, can you—" Some loud noises sounded out. "Thank you, Falcon. When you're done with the hangar, we could use some help over here." Squawk. "Where does Hydra get so many soldiers?" I grumbled. "No respect for the conservation of ninjutsu, I tell you." Something hit me like a hammer. Pain exploded from my right shoulder, and I squawked in surprise, stepping back from the sudden impact and pain. I looked at my shoulder to see that my scales had been slightly damaged by something, and looked up to see some soldiers on top of the cargo plane in the center of the hangar firing at me and Sam. I mean, they were shooting at Rhodey too, but he ignored their bullets to focus on the guys trying to escape, destroying a tank when they tried to get in. I leaped for the cargo plane at the same time. Sam flew towards it. There must have been 10 guys on top when Sam and I landed among them. I front-kicked one guy, blocked a fist thrown at me, and ducked as Sam rolled over my back to punch another soldier. I uppercut a man into the air and fired a blast into one other man's chest. Sam blocked a Hydra soldier's kick and punched him in the face with his gauntleted left hand. He twisted his hands when one of the Hydra soldiers raised a pistol to his face. Sam's helmet snapped over his face when the Hydra soldier shot him. The bullet bounced off, Sam stepping back from the impact, then stepping forward with a powerful front kick to the offending soldier's ribs. With a bit more space to work, I snapped my arms to the side, my energy whips lashing out, and swung them outwards. I heard Sam firing his repulsors, both of us unleashing our wings to float upwards as we attacked, back to back all the while. Rhodey flew to join us. For about 30 seconds, the 3 of us unleashed hell. I pulled in my energy whips to start firing blasts of green energy. Rhodey's minigun roared on his shoulder, his gauntlet guns joining in, Sam grabbed one of his new guns and fired it on automatic, yelling as the three of us flew back to back. Just like that, it was over. Every Hydra soldier in the hangar was either unconscious or dead. "This is Falcon?" Sam twisted in the air, Rhodey and I joining him, Sam at the front, Rhodey on his left, me on his right. "We're coming to join you, Team B." "See you then," Bucky replied calmly. "Sharon Carter, Agent." Sharon woke up gasping, taking massive gulps of air. She struggled to rise, only to feel something pulling at her arms and legs. She tried to move again, blearily looking down. She'd been strapped to a bed by thick brown restraints. Sharon stared at them, uncomprehending. "Sharon." She turned to see someone lying in a bed next to her. She blinked, trying to clear her eyes. When she looked again, Trip was giving her a weak smile. "Hey girl, how you feeling?" The young man was wearing the same restraints she was. Sharon shook her head, looking down at the IV in her arm, then at the room. "Trip? Where are we?" "Hell if I know." Trip looked around as well. "I woke up a few seconds before you did." The room was like a strange combination of ancient and new. The walls and floor were all made of stone, like that of a medieval castle. There was medical equipment, computers, and some people in lab coats roaming around. Wooden doors at the other side of the room were guarded by two men in black military gear. "Hey!" Trip yelled at a man passing by in a lab coat. "Where are we?" The man ignored him. "We must have been captured by Hydra," Sharon concluded, her mind still muddled by whatever drug had been used to knock her out. "What was that thing?"
"Aberration."
Someone walked up to them. Sharon struggled to look at him, only to wonder if she was still drugged. The man before her had green skin and a massive head. He smiled down at them, stepping to stand between their beds. "I apologize for the restraints. I'm afraid you both would fight against us otherwise." "Yeah, you're right," Trip said easily, smiling. "I'm probably going to punch you the second I can, Mr. Bobblehead." The big-headed man laughed. "I'm sure you would, but don't worry, soon enough, I'm sure we'll be great friends." Two men wheeled carts over to the beds, stopping them in front of Sharon and Trip's. On the carts were large flat-screen TVs. "Oh hey, you brought us entertainment?" Sharon asked, trying for bravado despite the sudden realization she was feeling. "I might need headphones," Trip said. "I mean, I love Sharon, but her action movies are way too cheesy." "You are both funny," the large-headed man smiled. "I hope my improvements to this method allow you to keep that." The televisions turned on, blinking swirls of lights appeared on the screens, and Sharon and Trip both began to struggle as they began to realize what was happening. After all, brainwashing still isn't an exact science.